had it on. Okay.
You want
Mr. McCord?
All that fruit is gone? All the fruit is gone. Is that bad?
Ron, you said Joy was home?
Yeah, Joy's home. She didn't even go back this afternoon, so I'm gonna break away so I can be with prior to working with that.
Okay. You're up.
I get all the time. Not so much now back there in my office, but when I went on.
Thank you, Miss Fluid White.
Okay, we're ready.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No problem.
I thought we were waiting on
She handed it out.
Okay.
Finished.
Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Yes, sir. Good morning. If we could, I'd like to redirect your attention to the information that was presented to you on Tuesday. At Tuesday night's board meeting, we talked about we acknowledged that the state legislature had ratified and changed the act and the provision for charter school and homeschool students to participate in interscholastic activities in public schools. I mentioned to you on Tuesday evening that we would have for you a final document that has been approved by our district's legal team. And at this time, if you have questions about the documents that were shared, they look similar to the forms that you received on Tuesday night. The only differences, of course, would be some of the grammatical errors have been since corrected, as well as making sure that we're in full compliance with all that is mentioned in the new law.
Does anybody have any questions? Yes, Laura.
Can you briefly share with us why we need two separate forms? I mean, what's the difference? What?
Yes, ma'am.
The two forms.
It's a great question. We have one form for homeschool students, another form for charter school students. If you notice, they are similar. The difference being that with the homeschool application, we have to have it noted on the application and prove that the student has attended homeschool for at least 1 year. And if you take a look at the homeschool participation at the bottom, it says the student is eligible. This is a homeschool application.
Okay.
Will this slide down, Mark? Slide down. Yes, ma'am. Right here on the bottom it says, I certify the following items regarding the above student's information has been truthful and accurate. The student has been taught in the homeschool setting for one full academic year prior to this application. That's not necessary for the charter school. And of course, as I said on Tuesday, I'm not quite sure if you remember, we had a flow chart, and we have the flow chart for you here again today. If you look at the flow chart, the responsibility to prove the information that has been given to this office as being correct will be the responsibility of this office. That will be me. And then we will vet the information out and push it forward to the respective schools. Yes, sir.
Couple of things. I know we talked Tuesday evening. Sorry. I know we talked Tuesday evening about the student or the family's responsibility to get the student to practice wherever that
Yes,
happens to be, and then if the student made the team, then obviously transportation to events, they become part of the team and they travel with the team.
Correct.
And
Correct.
that kind of stuff. And I'm sure the same is true of uniforms and all that kind of stuff. Insurance, and I know this is going to sound very technical. Charter schools can already participate in the high school league, can't they?
No, sir. Up until this act was, this bill was ratified, they could not.
So Riverview Charter School that goes through middle school can't already be participating against some of our teams?
No, sir.
Oh, I thought they did already, to be honest with you, in like
No.
basketball or something.
No, sir.
Can they
Okay.
sponsor teams now?
They can have their own team and participate in a league such as SCISA, which is South Carolina Independent School Association. I'm not sure if.
But as a part of our school district, this law doesn't allow them to form like a basketball team or a cross-country team or something. My question is about insurance, Mr. McCord. That's
Okay.
what I'm getting to.
Okay.
Because, you know, I know that members of the high school league get assessed a fee every year, depending on their population, and a part of that goes to cover the catastrophic insurance
Correct.
that the high school league provides for athletics. And I just want to, when we talk about student athletic insurance, I want to make sure we weren't going to run into a technicality with charter schools that might already be members of the high school league. Okay?
And I'm not sure if I understand the question, but I can tell you from the information that I received from the legal team and the insurance team, and that is that students would be covered under the district if they actually made a team. So,
Right.
for example, if a kid came from a charter school, made the basketball team, he would automatically, or a homeschool, he would automatically fall under district's insurance. Now, we were looking at the possibility of charging those students. In other words, to supplement for the costs associated with having them insured. But my understanding is that so long as they're part of a team, they will be covered.
Well, that's the root of my question.
Okay.
I mean, homeschool students obviously couldn't belong to some group that is affiliated under the high school league, but I guess I was under the impression that since Riverview is, I understand it's a charter school.
Correct,
Has
but
a
it's a
different
district charter
status,
school.
but it's part of the Beaufort County school system.
Right.
And as such, I thought that they were allowed to form a team and join the high school league if they chose to. Good, that's fine,
Okay.
okay?
Yes, sir.
I was just going to say that Riverview does have a basketball team. Yes. Already.
And what I don't know, and I'm sorry for my ignorance about this, I don't know whether they've ever applied to the high school league to say, we want to be a member school. You know, and then of course they would have been assessed a fee like any other member school,
Right.
which, you know, we don't want to duplicate the fees, is what I'm saying.
I understand. And I'm not sure if the high school league, up until now, I don't think there has been a charter school that is a part of the league. I'm not aware of any.
Well, James Island is a charter school.
Okay, that's one.
James Island High School is a charter school,
I'm
and,
aware of one now.
yeah,
Yes.
they have been for a number of years, and I know we compete against them. Some of our schools compete against them athletically.
Okay.
And I think we ought to explore that to make sure that we don't get in a complication with somebody down the road saying, hey, we're already a member of the high school league and pay our fee, there's no reason to charge the charter school kids.
I understand.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Homeschool is a totally different story, I understand
I
that.
understand.
Any other questions?
I just have one question. The high school league covers middle school and high school? I just want
Yes.
to make sure. Okay. Because up until this year, Riverview didn't have a middle school class, as far as I know. And I know they did, as Mr. Campbell pointed out, they had teams and they used our facilities, some of our facilities to play their games. And that much I know. But you're right, we need to get that
Within the
clarified.
schools, though.
Laura?
I have another question.
Okay. On Tuesday at the board meeting, you shared with us the definition of interscholastic and extracurricular. Now, on your charter school, you have extracurricular, but on your homeschool, you have interscholastic.
Right.
Can you briefly let me know again what the difference is?
The best way of understanding the differences between interscholastic and extracurricular, homeschool students can only participate in interscholastic activities, and that means my school is going to be in competition with your school.
Okay.
So in other words, if there's an activity where there's no competition involved, homeschool students could not be a part of that, whereas a charter school student could be a part of it.
Because they're actually part of our school.
Right.
Okay.
By way of participation. Yes, sir.
One of the questions I have, if a charter school, let's say middle school, has a basketball team, then their students don't have the right to play in a basketball team for another private or public school.
Correct. And I'll just use, I'm sorry. go
And
ahead.
if they're not in our district, there's a charter school that's not in our district, and they have a basketball team, I ask the same question. They're not allowed to participate in our school's basketball program.
Now, if the charter school is not in our district, then they don't have anything to do with the district. So
Okay,
they would
I'm
not
saying
be-
it's not a district school, it's a regular it's a state charter school, but located in our district.
You can, and let me make sure I'm understanding the question correctly. There's a charter school that's in our district.
Okay, let me,
It's not
Riverview,
locally sponsored.
I'll do it in two questions.
Okay.
Riverview is a charter school, which is part of our school district.
Correct.
Located in Beaufort County. Now, if they have a basketball team, then their students are not allowed to participate.
Correct.
In our, now, the new school, Bridges Charter School, is a statewide charter school, but it's and chartered by the state, but it's located in Beaufort County. Again, if they have a basketball team, those students cannot participate.
Correct. That's correct. If there is a program in existence at the homeschool or charter school, then the student has to participate with that particular school.
Okay. Fred, you had another question?
Maybe, I apologize for being absent earlier. And maybe have you been over the chart already?
We looked at it, but I'll be more than happy to answer any questions you have.
I was just curious, when the request comes in and it says, no, there is no appeal beyond the school level. Is that what we want to have? Like that, it's your office, you bear the brunt of it, and that's it?
That's it.
That's it.
And the reason for that is because what we don't want to have happen, Chairman Washington, is for someone to bring to you from the school or from a family and say, hey, we'd like another opportunity to appear before you to see if you'll overturn something. We're not going to deny a person so long as they meet all the requirements.
I guess I wasn't thinking of coming to the board level. I guess I was looking at coming to the superintendent's level, not the board. I definitely agree that it shouldn't come
Or an
to
appeals
the
panel
board.
or something.
Well, as the superintendent's designee, then that would stop with me.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I was just going to address what Mr. Washington was saying, because he is actually, he's over the athletic director. In fact, he's the chief athletic director for the district. So it's his decision. His decision is final.
Okay. All right.
Well, let me switch gears a few minutes. Let me go to academic. Suppose we have students that in the charter school, we say we have about 5, in the 12th grade, 11th grade, but the charter school did not offer courses in physics or calculus. Now, if those students wanted to really take a course in calculus or physics, would our system allow those students to come to our school to take those classes?
No.
Why not? Because, reason why I say why not,
Okay.
because those students is really our student as well. And that's a public charter school. So why can't they participate in taking take some of our classes if they don't offer the class at their school?
Well, this
Let them answer.
This
is not
bill
outside.
does not answer that question.
No, but I know, that's what I said, let me switch gear
Okay.
and go to the academic and see how we can tie academic in, because I need someone in academic. Because
Right.
this, if we talk about sports, I want to make sure academic is the same thing too. Where's,
Dr.
he's
Rhodes?
not here. Well, we'll catch him when he returns.
Let me just make one
We
statement.
get him when he returns. When he
Okay,
returns, we'll bring that question.
Well, then that's something outside of this, because that's not on the agenda. You can talk to him during your break,
Academic part is fine.
because it's not on the agenda. It's a different topic. Any other questions from an athletic standpoint? Okay, thank you very much. then.
Do we need to take any action today?
No, I don't think so. This is just
This
information.
is information. This will be disseminated publicly as soon as today. And the reason being is because football begins on July 27th, so we want families. We'll forego the 10 days for this particular time frame.
Chairman Washington, I like to have that answer, my answer. I need to get an answer to my question. I think that's important.
Thank you. We'll take care of it during the course of the day. Where are we? I'm sorry.
That's the only action we've taken.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Find my agenda.
I had mine here.
Next item has to do looking the achievement gap
Career process by schools.
by school. By school. Dr. Rhodes, are you up on that? The
Dr. Rhodes?
achievement by school?
Not that I'm aware of. Correct me if that-
Okay. Well, let's do this. Are you dealing with the achievement gap?
Well, it would certainly be under instruction, but specifically what questions or anything I can come up and.
Hold on.
Well, Mr.
I think Dr. Rhodes probably had specific information to share.
Hold on.
He probably can
I'd
answer my
like to,
question.
when you come back, because I have a question for you to address.
Ron, I'd like to talk to you before, because you don't want to open Pandora's box. Don't open Pandora's box. I'll talk to you. Then if you want to ask the question.
The state charter school, they cannot. The state charter school, they cannot.
No, state.
No problem.
Yeah, you could.
For the public.
Let me find, Robin, let me get your copy of your agenda, because I don't, for some reason, I don't have mine. I've got it. All right, I'm good. Okay. Dr. Truesdale, are you going to cover?
A little bit.
Okay, good.
I don't know if you can do.
Good morning again, board members.
Okay.
We talked at a recent meeting about our initiative with Grad Nation, that we've signed on to be a Grad Nation community, the only school district in South Carolina who's chosen to do that. The reason we did is because of the data I'm passing around to you right now. It fits in with our achievement gap conversation. Board members will remember that a year ago, you commissioned a study of our minority achievement. And the study clearly highlighted that while we were closing the gap between our Hispanic students and our Caucasian students, we were not closing it fast enough to really eradicate the gap. Our students, our Latino learners are far behind in reading and math than our other students, and so thank you, Robin, for putting it up here. The study also highlighted the performance of our African American students, particularly our males. Particularly in the area of reading was a challenge, and you will remember that I believe it was at this board meeting, this work session last year, that we studied it really hard, and we talked with you all about some ideas that we had for our minority youth about building in our students an awareness of their need to take ownership of their own learning. And we shared with you all our leadership programs for our minority youth. We have our Gentlemen's Club in 7 schools. We have ladies' clubs in 2 schools. We have most clubs, Men of Strength, in 3 schools. And we also have a program that we shared with you all last year this time that we had just started for our summer bookends, I call them. We had a week in June and a week in August wherein students came together who were student leaders, happened to be males. The reason was because the data indicated we had challenges mostly with our African American boys in terms of their owning their own responsibility for their learning. Bluffton Middle School was a very successful site for this program. It was the southern site of where we held the program, but students from all of the middle schools came together at Bluffton Middle and Robert Smalls, 10 students from each of those middle schools, and they studied the 7 Habits of Highly Effective Teens, and they talked about taking ownership of their own learning. And we took them to a college visit, and throughout the school year then, we did booster shots with these same students, with the 80 kids. And so what we wanted to do was to talk a little bit with the board this morning and bring it into context of grad rate. So grad rate is not one of the areas that we focused on last year, but it is, you need me, Robin? It is the area that we have tackled for this coming school year. The principals last Thursday and all the leadership team members, the coordinators, the directors, senior staff met for a full day, and we drilled down with the National Director of Grad Nation. Grad Nation is an initiative of America's Promise Alliance. That is the nonprofit formed by General Collin and Mrs. Powell, and it is based upon the 5 promises that every community should have for its youth. As you all know, we have been named one of the 100 best communities in the United States by America's Promise Alliance. Part of their initiative is Grad Nation. Grad Nation is a commitment that has been made by America's Promise that they will push in communities on a goal of 90% of our students graduating from high school on time by the year 2020. We launched last Thursday with our principals an ownership reality check. The executive director of Grad Nation was here, Dr. Betty Molina Morgan, shared with them statistics on grad rates nationally, regionally, state, and in our county. Of course, they had really worked on the data for our county in relation to others, and she will be back for your
breakfast.
State of Education breakfast. What are we calling it, Mr.
State of Schools.
State of Schools, thank you. State of Schools breakfast on September the 7th. 7th? 7th. Friday, September 7, Dr. Morgan will be back to work with community members using the same data and sharing with them. We need to do something because, as you will see, we have some real challenges here. At Battery Creek in 2007, we were at 69%. Waffle to 71%, 2010 dropped a bit, 2011 stabilized back pretty much where we were, 64%. If these are high school graduation, let me disclaim this. On-time graduation means 4 years after the student entered 9th grade. We do have summer graduation coming up. I hope all board members will be able to join us in August for our Friday night graduation. It is for not just adult ed learners, but any high school students. August 6th? Yes. Thank you. Mr. Washington, August 6th, not just adult education graduation, but any high school student who did not graduate, walk across the stage because he or she did not pass the exit exam, or one section of the exit exam, or both sections, or failed a class or 2, they have a summer graduation. Their principals will be there. They'll be in their robes from their school. Every student has an opportunity to have,
Excuse me, August 17th.
I knew it didn't sound right, August 17th, thank you, good. It's the Friday night before we open on Monday. August 17th, thank you, Mr. Washington. We were only off by one digit. A big important one, the tens place.
At 6 p.m. at Battle Creek High School.
6 p.m. Battery Creek High School, our largest auditorium. It's a delightful event. Last year we graduated, I think it was 22 high school students who had not yet had an opportunity to march. I want to also commend this board. You all were very courageous 2 years ago to say students will no longer march in graduation in commencement exercises if they have not met all requirements for commencement. That was a huge step for our community. It was a tough year the first year, and this year, I don't know how many calls I got. Cynthia's not here for me to ask this morning, but we didn't receive but 2 or 3 calls this year. Last year it was a deluge, the first year we put that in. Because in this county, historically, students have been allowed to march in graduation if they had not yet passed the exit exam and if they were within 1 or 2 classes of graduation. We no longer do that. You have to have met all requirements before you march. The students who do march deserve, and they were the ones who really pushed this. Our Student Advisory Council was very adamant that if they've done all the work they need to graduate, the only people who should be marching with them are those who have completed all requirements. So that's another example of the high expectations that you as a board set for us, and I'm pleased to say that it is making a big difference. Is it painful when your grandmother's already got her plane ticket from wherever? Yes, it is painful, but Johnny should have thought about that before he didn't pass his math class. So it's creating personal accountability, but it's also creating a culture in our community that we really believe that all of our students can graduate and will graduate on time. So this 9th grade to 12th grade on-time graduation rate, students who graduate in the summer on August 17th, are counted in our 4-year on-time graduation rate. Some students, things happen to them, and it takes them 5 years to graduate. Lots of things happen to students. Sometimes students need to drop out for a little bit and come back. Sometimes the students have children, and they decide to take a year to get that straight, and then they come back, and they finish in 5 years. 5-year graduation rate is not up here. This is only 4-year graduation rate. That's the rate we have to use. Beaufort High School was at 69%. A few years ago, almost 70%, and is now at 71% in 2011. Bluffton High School, it's grown from 65% to 70%. Hilton Head was at 74%. It's now at 73.7%, about the same. The district overall last year was 61% and has gone up to 69.9, almost 70%. But folks, if you look back over 5 years, you'll see it's basically flat. While our elementary and middle school children's scores in math and reading have increased significantly, grad rate hasn't really moved. So we're tackling this one this year. What we wanted to do was to, Robin, if you'll push us down a little bit to the ethnicity, was to share with the board that we're tackling this one head on, and we wanted you to look at it with us because this is reality check. Our Caucasian students, you're looking in the 70s, your African American students in the 60s, Asian Pacific Islanders, there are so few of those students that these data are very unpredictable. They jump around. They jump around a lot. The one that really causes us major heartburn and pause is that 50% of our Latino learners are leaving us in high school. We are making huge double-digit increases in their reading and math scores in elementary and middle. What we're finding is that when our students get to high school, as soon as they're old enough, many of our students are dropping out to go get jobs. We have to engage our community in order to affect this, and we wanted to put it on the table just as an awareness item so that you all knew what we were about. And so when we're kicking this Grad Nation concept, it's not just because it's part of America's Promise, it's because of those data right there. Overall, as you saw, Robin, if you go back to the top again, overall as a district, people often say, what is your overall rate? We're at 69.9, 70% of our students graduating from high school in 4 years. Absolutely unacceptable.
I have a question.
Mr. Burns?
My question is the amount of students in
a particular school, student population, does that have a effect on the percentage of the students passed? I mean,
How they perform?
what I'm asking is that, let's say we have a particular school with a low population.
Smaller school.
Smaller school.
Yes, sir.
Right. Does that have a direct effect on the amount passed? Top chart?
Graduation rate?
Graduation rate, yes.
I'm thinking, Mr. Burns, not necessarily, no. No, because if you can, I have seen schools that are as large as 2,500, 3,000 kids who have high graduation rates, and I've seen large schools with low graduation rates. I've seen really small schools with low graduation rates and really small schools with very high graduation rates. It doesn't have really an effect of the size of a school. What makes a difference is the adult relationships in that school. So if you are able, in a big school, to break down the school so it has a feeling, so that I know each and every one of you by name. Who was it was telling me yesterday in the afternoon, late afternoon, about a school that they knew about where everybody knows your name? Not just knows your name, but you're accountable to those adults. Was it you, Jim? What were you saying?
When I was at the State Department, we focused in on Darlington County because they had that particular success in graduation rate. And we had
High graduation rate in the state, and it's a very high poverty.
High poverty, largely rural area, and we had Superintendent Rainey Knight on, along with the principal of Latta High School. Latta is very, very rural. I mean, it's way out in the country. And their principal, her secret to her success, she said, was that she was just in kids' faces every day. Went to their homes, went to their churches. Now, she's able to do that perhaps because she has a small student body, but that doesn't mean it couldn't be replicated. But it was face-to-face, every day. What are you doing? Why aren't you doing what you're supposed to be doing? Sorts of things.
Right, yeah.
When we presented to you all our Career and College Readiness Initiative, and we talked about the success that we've been having at Whale Branch Early College High School, I would submit a lot of that is the personal interaction, and it makes a big difference. I know of another high school in South Carolina that had the highest dropout rate in the state at the time, a number of years ago, and they were able to increase their college attendance rate from about 5% to 35% in just a couple of years by making sure that every student knew, Ron, where'd you apply? Where did you apply, Mr. Burns? And in your face every day about what, did you do your work? Did you get your college application in? What are you thinking of? Did you take your SAT? When we have counselors and teachers where everybody owns the success of the kids in the high school, one of the things that we brainstormed last Thursday with the principals of what can we do? What can we do? Little things such as at Whale Branch Middle School, there's signs all over the school, college focus, college focus. There's pennants from Clemson, College of Charleston, South Carolina State, all over the state, up and down the halls, as every teacher's classroom is marked with the pennant from where did you go to school, to ask me about where I went to school, ask me about Technical College of the Low Country. So we're going to try to replicate that a bit this year and build some energy around folks so that there is a conscious discussion in the community about graduation rate, so that we build this discussion in the faith community, in the business community, in the chambers of commerce, and in the schoolrooms.
Well, the reason why I asked that question is because, let's use a hypothetical. Let's say a school has 2 students. 1 failed. What percentage is that?
50%.
Okay. This is why I'm asking, as far as that population is concerned. And I know I say could. I didn't say must or will. I say could. Could that have a bearing on it?
What I think that you want to do is, instead of thinking of a percentage-wise, you look at how many students.
We will not listen to anyone who does not use a mic.
So one of the things that we try to do, Mr. Burns, is to break down the size of a school into units. So for instance, at Beaufort High School, we have small schools. At Battery Creek High School, we have tri-academies. At every school, we have 9th grade academies. Breaking it down into a sizable unit. We know that when students are with a small family of teachers, such as in a middle school, they have a team. They have concentrated care so that if you have 4 teachers and 100 kids, that they are a family in terms of accountability of if you're absent, somebody's going to notice that you're not there. And what we found in our schools, I'll take ownership for Beaufort County Schools, we began charting with our high school principals. We meet with the high school principals in the summer and again between Christmas and New Year's for a full day. And the high school principals, and we drill down to the data in their high school. And I get very granular with them of, here are the names of the 42 students who were no-shows at the beginning of your school year, who visited their homes, where are they? Where are these no-shows? Who knew they didn't show back up? Because if you are a 9th grader and you go through school, finish out 9th grade, and then you just don't come back in the 10th grade, and nobody goes to find out what happened to you, a lot of times it's because you turned 16 and you just decided to stop coming. We need to notice that by name, and we do that every year. But we haven't yet affected these numbers.
Mr. Evans?
I think looking at this, and I'm sorry that, on one of the charts we go through 2011 and the other one we don't. I understand that's out of your control. But I will look at the bottom chart that talks about graduation rate by ethnicity. And I'm concerned about from 2007 to 2010, the drop-off, sometimes severe, in every one of those ethnic groups.
They are. You see why we're worried.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out mathematically, maybe Mr. Speaks can explain it to me, how the overall graduation rate is where it is when the individual ethnic graduation rates have dropped off so much.
Yeah.
I don't know whether there is a good explanation for that.
Was there a question? I'm sorry.
Well,
Mr.
no,
Evans. I was off task.
it goes back to what we talked about when we first started talking about the replicating the Whale Branch model.
Yes.
It is that personal contact, and, I made the point at that time that in a couple of our schools, we've got much higher counselor-to-student ratios. And, maybe that's something that can be addressed along the line to help with this more personal contact and stuff.
I do want to mention to you all, too, just in case you might have forgotten, that we have a significant grant with the Commission on Higher Education for Gear Up, and that they have placed counselors in 2 of our middle schools, at Robert Smalls Middle School and Ladies Island Middle School, and those counselors will be with those students for 6th grade. They move with the kids to 7th grade, 8th grade, all the way through freshman year of college. So it'll be interesting to see if that makes a difference, because then those students are very, very accountable.
Did you want to answer the mathematical question, Mr.
I think Mr. Evans said a few minutes ago make a heck of a lot of sense, because I feel like you just can't hear me. I think it makes sense because when you don't have the amount of academic advisor in those schools, you don't expect them to expect the graduation rate to be real high, and you wouldn't expect them to think about going to college. Now, when we address Whale Branch or early college, that's a small school, but at the same time, you have someone there will be dealing with the student on a daily basis, asking them, have you done this, have you done this, and what are you doing in your school, and so forth. You also have the parents out there saying the same thing, have you got this in, have you done this? It's a lot of people involved in those kids' life, but again, for the school system, what we need to do when we have those large schools like this, we need to make sure that we have the amount of counselor or academic advisor in there so that we can increase that graduation rate.
I had Mr. Campbell, Ms. Bush, and Mr. Wilson.
Yeah, I just want to piggyback on what Mr. Speaks says about Whale Branch. Not only do you have 2 good counselors at that school, but you have teachers also. And not only teachers, you have people that works in the cafeteria, the hall monitor, volunteers, the community is involved, and that's how you get good results. One thing I had talked about some years ago that I had brought to this board about the program that they have in Dade County, Florida, where when children are not in school, what they did, they went and hired one person, and that person would go out in the community and knock on doors and find those students and bring them back to the school. And when I brought that to the board and some years ago, folks said, well, it's going to cost too much money. But if we want to see the results, we have to invest in our children. And if we don't want to invest in our children, then we won't see the results.
Ms. Bush, I do want to remind you that I know that one year, I don't know if we did it any other years, but we had a program where that's actually happened. We had principals or counselors or people to be assigned to go and find students.
Are we still doing that?
No, we lost
Did it for 2
the
years.
first things in the budget cuts that we lost were the expectation coaches. They're called graduation coaches in many communities.
Okay. Ms. Bush and then Mr. Wilson.
I agree with the discussion thus far with how we engage students. But I have to believe that it's based on the school culture, the culture of that school. And it starts with the principal, and it's fed throughout the staff of the school and the whole community. If the culture of the school is to save and to put forth all the effort to save all the children, and if you have a high expectation level for your students, that's going to permeate through the entire school community, and it will work. I know when we opened Bluffton High School with the new principal, Aretha Roan Bush, that was the culture of that school, was to own each child. Someone had to be able to put their hands on that child and know where that child was and what was actually happening in that child's life. And until we get that culture in all of our schools, we're not going to continue. We're not going to see the improvements in our graduation rates. But I do, after making that statement, I do have a question. I think there was an article in the paper last week regarding the graduation rates, and it highlighted Beaufort. And I don't remember what the numbers were, but I think I asked you, Dr. Truesdale, who were those students? And I think you shared then that these were the Hispanic population, the majority of the students were.
I think the question was about our biggest challenges, and they are,
okay.
We have a challenge in every
Exactly.
subgroup.
Right.
Every subgroup. The one that we highlighted last Thursday at our meeting that the principals were just really dismayed about was, okay, so our if you look at 3 through 8 longitudinal data on how are our students performing, are we getting better by subgroup? And when you look at our reading and math in our elementary and middle schools, you see improvement. Mm-hmm. Well, then in the Latino learners, and then they're dropping out.
Okay.
Half of them. That's a real issue. If we look at our African American students, it's flat. Mm-hmm. Well, if we're making all these inroads in their performance,
where is it?
Why aren't they staying in school?
Yeah.
And so what we decided this year is we're really going to hit that pretty hard in our communities to say, and ask our students as they're, why are you leaving?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I had Mr. Wilson, Mr. Rivers, and Mr. Evans again, but before Mr. Evans goes again, I'm going to have my swipe at the apple.
Okay, we're all talking about what's happening in the high school. Remember, though, folks, we had a district that wasn't running in all cylinders throughout. And we talk about, Mr. Campbell always talks about early childhood. But that early childhood is the same thing of having good middle schools and having good feeder programs going into the high school. Almost every one of these grades here, those kids were in the high school before the middle school started to improve. If we see the success that we've had in the middle schools, and it's going to happen years later also with the success we're having in the elementary and early childhood as they move up through the system, you should automatically see better performance in the high school from graduation rates because the kids are going to have a more positive attitude because they're succeeding in the earlier grades before they even get to the high school. And I think that's good news, and you may not even see it next year, but 2-3 years from now, that should have a major impact on graduation rates. Even though we don't see it now, it's hard to change somebody in high school, particularly in the attitude saying, I went at 16, I'm gone. But if we change them in the middle school and we have those attitudes and are performing better, more of those kids are going to graduate.
Mr. Wilson makes a really important point. When we first started having this conversation about the percentage of students who would come into high school reading 1 or more grade levels below, you all will remember that 5 years ago there were 40% of our students coming into 9th grade reading 1 or more grade levels below. We've reduced it to 25%. We looked at those data yesterday. 25% is still too many kids reading 1 or more grade levels below coming into high school. But it has improved a great deal. If Rachel would not print this statistic, I'll remind you of one. Will you promise? That yesterday I shared with you, I just shared with the board, not with the public, the data coming out for the fall. Exit exam is a big hurdle for our kids. 90% of the kids have passed the exit exam on first attempt in grade 10 in English language art for the first time. That won't be posted until November, so that's why Rachel can't hear it. So she has to have her little ears on at the moment. But that is huge. That's huge. So that will be an opportunity for us to move it forward.
I just need to make this comment. Guys in the truck, if you're recording this, you bleep out that data that was just repeated, okay? Thank you.
Sorry, I forgot about, the guys were here. But the point is, the kids in the high school in sophomore year now, a large number of those students are going to be able to access graduation because exit exam is getting better for them. But when it comes time for affecting this, and don't forget, these data are a year old. So the kids, the most recent data we have are for 2011. We don't have 12 data yet.
3 years, you're going to see a major difference.
It will. Because the bleed up, it's all about the reading and the math skills.
Sure.
All right, Mr. Rivers?
Yeah, and we are dealing with the achievement gap as well as graduation. They're together, right? Yeah, in thinking about this topic, I guess my question is, how do we redeem the time? How do we redeem the time? Why do I say that? Yesterday when we were looking at the presentation that Dr. Truesdale gave us and was talking about kids going to the farm, the factory, and the university, and then on the conveyor belt, there were some kids that were just being dropped off. And we keep, bantering the term, the number 25%. But yet still, we don't have any kids that we can afford to throw away. And in that 25%, then my question comes back again is, how do we redeem the time? Realizing that if the kids are already behind, and you only have X amount of time, maybe 15 years to effectuate their learning experience, how then do we as a district, can it be done? What can be done to try to redeem some of that time, because we only have a limited amount of time to affect their lives. And I know we're not saying that 25% of the kids not achieving on par is okay, but yet that has been going on for some time. The achievement gap is not something new. Like Mr. Washington was saying on yesterday too, in reference to the shoes and to the hospital, our job is to make sure that 25% of the patients that come into our institution, we just don't call them morgue. And so how do we do that? I mean, can it be done? Because it's critical. And for me, every one of us in here who has children, all our kids are doing well. My oldest daughter, forensic science, are the ones doing, want to be a pharmacist. I mean, so our kids are going to be doing fine. But how are we going to effectuate the least of these? The least of these. And a lot of times when we throw about numbers and start talking about how great we are, we forget about the least of these. And if the least of these is not our main objective, then we are really counterfeit, really. So my question again goes back to, how do we redeem the time of these students? And sometimes we put it on the parents, But when the parents send their kids to the hospital, they want the kids to get fixed.
That's right.
You know? So how do we redeem the time?
What some of the principal, when we brainstormed exactly that question, Reverend Rivers, last week with our principals at our July the 12th event, all-day discussion about these really challenging, hard, gut-wrenching worries of, okay, we've reduced this and we've reduced that, but what about the 25%? So we brainstormed a lot of strategies. Two principals shared. I'll quote one of the principal, Priscilla Drake said, you break it down to the student. And it was followed up by, just like Mr. Speaks was just saying, and it was followed up by Mrs. Onan, who shared that last year, as I mentioned to you all yesterday, I think it was 72 students had not yet passed the exit exam. So every adult in the school was assigned to a student. And that adult's job was to make sure you knew the student, you knew his or her birthday, you knew their family, you knew where they were, you knew their attendance record, you knew their grades. You really bonded with the student to say, I believe in you, and I will make sure that you get what you need to get the exit exam, if in that case that was that example. So we began to share these strategies. I think the first step that this board's always done when we see a problem is you hold up the mirror and you say, what is? And then you ask us, what are you going to do about it? And that's what we're in the process of developing.
I don't have a little mic. Oh, bad thing. No, I need to stand up because I've been sitting long. Reverend Rivers' question goes right to the point of why this is on the agenda. And then if you notice in the little expectation I sent out, what is it that what direction can we provide the administration, or can we, I want us to have a real discussion, not just highlight the problem, but do we have any suggestions for solutions or approach? And one of the realities we have to deal with is that we don't have a lot of money to do this. So we have to, I say we didn't have any money, so we don't have a lot of money to do this. But sometimes maybe we need to look at what we do have as resources and try to figure out a better way to do what we're doing. Okay? Now the problem is systemic. The problem is just not the high school, because as has been said, we talk about early childhood, and when we talk about early childhood, we're really talking about 0 to 3 too. So we're talking home. So we say if you don't start right, it's very difficult to end right if you don't have a good start. So part of our emphasis has to be 0 to 3, and what does it take to get 0 to 3 addressed within the resources and that we have. Then, what does it take for us when it comes to early childhood so the pre-K, the kindergarten, and through our grade 12, what is it that we're doing to make sure that those that we do have in get everything they need to stay in? Because we know that some of our kids come in with different abilities or resources or background, those kinds of things. So have we truly put something in place to address what we know we have? So what are those factors? We talk about poverty being factors, we talk about parental involvement being factors, we talk about the education of the parent being a factor, all the things that research tell us. So what can we do about it? What can we do about it as a district? I suggest that we take some time now and go back and let's not just rehash the problem, but let's talk about us, what we have, what we know, because we have some strengths. You know, there's always this thing about doing the SWOT thing, you do your strengths, your weaknesses, and all those. Well, let's talk about the strengths we have. Yes, sir.
Mr. Washington, would you include disabilities in that, those areas?
Oh, absolutely. Because we're responsible for special needs students. We're responsible for every child. We can't be selective, as we say around here all the time. Everybody that comes to the door, we got to take care of. We can't be selective. And we need to provide quality to all those that come to us. But some come better prepared than others. I guess if we were industry, and you're from Pittsburgh, and you know about Pennsylvania, and you know about the steel and coal. I hit a spot.
Michael?
Maybe you ought to address Mr. Rivers.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought you
But
were
the point is, you know, we have another folks that talk about manufacturing. Some people try to look at us as a pure business model. Well, we can't follow a pure business model in education. You can't. You know, if we were manufacturing, you know, I guess we'd have, if we were producing iron or steel, you'd have your raw material that'll come in, and so what you do, you'd weed out the poor ore that comes in, but all the ore that comes in us, we got to take. And we've got to create a good product. What we do is try to create the best that ore can be, get it to its best, so it does serve a purpose.
Mr. Washington?
Yes, sir.
Just to kind of emphasize what you're saying, we don't have a scrap heap.
Right, thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Washington,
so what-
I would like to say it can be run like a business, but you want zero defects, period.
Okay, all right, well, there are
Because if
business
something that
applications.
doesn't have has high
right.
defects, you're
Now,
going to
now,
run a
now,
business.
let me point out, now, Mr. Wilson, and again, I want us to have the kind of discussion that's not going to be the regular sit down and here we are, we're going to, Mr. Wilson brings up a good point. He injects his business background and his orientation is such that business principles really matter. And he comes from that orientation. And we want the business community to support us. And there are business, and we have to recognize and we have to say that whenever applicable, we use sound business practices or policies to get what we want. But there are some times when you do have to deviate from what's perceived as a regular corporate or manufacturing model. Maybe it's just a manufacturing piece. But certain business principles apply across the board. And that's what we've got to start addressing and getting business people to feel comfortable and for them to understand that we are applying certain basic principles that they embrace. Okay? Now, I know all this, how you guys say, well, why is he saying all this? Because, folks, that's the reality, that's the environment that we have to live in. And there are other aspects of our community, too, that we have to recognize and we have to work with. So I'm saying, how can we design a model, given our resources? We are blessed in Beaufort County to have a number of governmental and nonprofit agencies that address the issues, the barriers that our kids face. And we are doing a good job of getting them to work together in partnership with us, but we have to look at that even closer. And we have to find ways, you know, when we talk about the adult model or mentor or example that students need that they may not have in their home, how can we work with others like United Way? How can we work with others like the Boys and Girls Club to help provide that kind of, to close those voids that we know exist? I want us to engage in a kind of discussion about talking about specific things that we can move towards, taking what we have in our community to address the problems that we're always talking about, to get to that 25%. How can we focus on that 25%, but in focus on the 25%, recognize that 0 to 3, because we've said for a long time, we've got to get our General Assembly and other folks to embrace the notion of what Judge Thomas said in his ruling, that the state of South Carolina does not do enough to prepare children to enter kindergarten. We have got to take that on. And there are ways to do that without additional money. No, not Clarence
Now, you know
Thomas,
better.
Judge
Wash your mouth.
Thomas and, I forget his first name. It's the, what's Judge Thomas's first name? Oh, okay.
No,
All right.
he has the pigmentation,
All right.
he ain't no brother.
But my point is that we need to, no, that's all right.
There seems to be general agreement about that.
It's the state appeals court that rules it with South Carolina, in South Carolina case. I'll get it later. But my point is, let's talk concrete, let's talk things that we can work on, that's within our control, that we can do and start in helping our schools. Let's use our resources as board members to help and to work with our schools, because I know she's been very concerned. She told me, this is something that's kicking my butt. I don't want to put it that way. And I don't like this. Thomas Cooper, that's what it is. Judge Thomas Cooper. But I want us to engage in a discussion that comes up with some things, some approaches that can support what we want to do. All right? And if it takes a little bit of money, we can come up with a little bit of money. Now, let me give you one example of something that I have. And I started not sharing. I'm going to share this with all of you. This comes from, we've heard of NOC, right? Neighborhood Outreach Center. And I've been in touch with, and all of us has been in touch with Dr. Sharma about his program. And I want to give you an example of something he proposes. Pass that around. Robin, you can put this on the screen. If you can, a couple of them. You can put that, pass that around. Yeah. All of those. All of them. Okay. That's one thing. And there is a second that I want to give to you. The second is essentially what they're doing right now. Okay? Now, the superintendent has said that we're definitely working right now with Boys and Girls Club, the Y, we're trying to work with churches and other groups. I'm saying that if we can identify groups who are willing to do specific things that meet our needs, we need to find ways of making sure that we can have that partnership and that arrangement that allows them within bounds to do things that will help us meet our goals. And it may call for us to do things a little bit different. Now, one of the things in these two things, and I'm more apt to look at the piece that says, can we do something in terms of writing a joint grant? Those are the kinds of things that we can do, and people look, and those people who do give grants tend to want to have partnerships in place to do that. We're at an advantage because it's not just the school and maybe one entity, but we have the force of the Human Service Alliance in this county who could bring other partners to help make this even better. So what I want us to start talking about are those kinds of things we know, and throwing out some ideas about how do we address the problem, not just identify the problem. We've identified the problem long enough. Let's stop talking about the identity of the problem. Let's talk about how we can come up with some solutions to the problem, or at least give some direction if we think. Now, one of the ways my contribution is going to be, while I have met with Dr. Sharma, I agree with some of the approach, I think that the starting point in consultation with the administration is, I know that we don't have right now, given our budget constraints, we can't afford to fund staff to put there. I know that. And I know that at this point we're hard pressed to give more computers, refreshed computers, because we have demands elsewhere too, and there are some other things we need to work out. But what might be reasonable is the joint grant approach that addresses, and they have been successful. I'm going to tell you, I think that there has been some success in what they do. But we also need to know more about that success and how can we spread that success. Okay? Some of us are more knowledgeable of what they do than others. But that's something that we need to embrace as a group. So the kinds of discussion I'm looking for, engagement is, what can we talk, how can we start talking about specific solutions and directions for the board? Mr. Campbell?
Yeah, you talk about this partnership in businesses. Sure, we have, there are several businesses in this county that really support public education. But there are some that don't seem to care. And I don't know the reason why. And like you said, we know what the problem is, not only here in this county, in this state.
Mr. Campbell, I want to pick an argument with you. Can I pick an argument with you a minute? This is a friendly argument.
Go ahead.
Okay? Now, we know our glass is not full. Our glass is half full. I agree that there are some people who do not support. What I would like us to start doing is focusing on those who are willing,
right,
and build on that. And I'm not going to deal with, I ask us not to deal with those who won't yet, because let me tell you what happens. Success breeds envy and success.
Right.
Okay?
Okay, I understand.
At least in my opinion.
I understand that. And when you talk about the politician in Columbia, I don't know, you remember the last workshop we went to, the guy said, you get what you send, you know, the results. And what we have sent to Columbia from here, we know what that is. Okay, now,
here's again, my analogy is this, and I'll take one. We have cultivated a relationship with, a strong relationship with a legislator that has produced some dollars that we had not been getting. Again, it's not perfect.
I understand
but
that.
But I'd like us to continue to focus on those that we can influence, and success breeds envy and success. I guarantee you.
Okay.
I
understand what you're saying. But now, I agree. We can get the computers and put them in different areas in this county, but we have to focus and get those folks to help us to get funds to really have a early childhood education in this county. And I'm talking about 100%, because that's where you will see the test scores will go up, the graduation rate will go up, the dropout rate will go down, and the crime will go down. And if we really want to see a change, we have to invest in our kids, and invest in from 0 to 3, and 3 to 4, and 4 to 5, and you will see that change.
And give yourself a pat, Mr. Campbell.
No, I don't.
No. I'm serious now. And again, I want to touch on what you just said. Think about where we were 4 years ago.
Right.
When it came to 0 to 3. Look at the relationship we have developed with Head Start that has expanded, and the decision we have made about our pre-kindergarten and kindergarten classes that has expanded the numbers of children we serve from, I think it was about 400, we're now up to 900 students. Okay? Now, all I'm saying is that we need to build on that. I'm asking us, and because your point is right, we've got to serve and identify all those students.
That's true.
But let's build on the process that leads us to expand and meet the need. Let's build on success breeds envy and creates more success.
That's right. Okay.
Oh, I've got two other people over here. No, I'm sorry.
I'm finished.
Okay, but I want us to engage. I had, was it Mr. Rivers first, or Bill, and then Mr. Rivers, then Mr. Wilson, and Ms. Bush. Ms. Bush was before you, Mr. Wilson. I'm sorry.
Well, that's okay. Ladies first.
Well, I think we're looking at different efforts. One is the long-term effort that is best represented by early childhood education. Okay, and I think we all accept that. But we've got to have some short-term efforts, and let me give you a couple of suggestions.
Again, can I engage you like I did with Ms. Campbell? You'll continue to talk. What I'm looking at is systemic. Systemic means that we're going to talk about our 0 to 3 every level until we graduate. And there's a different approach sometime, or different things that you apply to each. We can't ignore any level. So go ahead.
I think that's where I was going. Okay,
But I wanted you to understand when I said
I know in
systemic.
my mind that's where I was going. Let me just, I don't know where Phyllis went, okay? But we get paid money for every student that's enrolled in our schools, okay? When we go out and capture somebody, and I use that in a broad sense, okay, that isn't attending school and bring them back in, it's a revenue plus.
Yeah.
Okay? Now, I know that we cut the expectation coaches.
Can I say this too? Again, continue on, but it's also an expense. And sometimes it's a greater expense than the revenue it generates.
Well,
But go ahead.
that's at the heart of my question, okay, or my point. It may not be. It may actually be a revenue creator on the positive side. Let me give you an example. Several years ago, we hired a risk manager. Everybody looked and said, how can we afford that? Well, what do we know now? That risk manager has more than paid her salary in the reduction of liability and accidents and how we report things and how we train people to go up ladders properly and all that stuff.
That's the business part I told you.
Yeah, okay. So my point is the same here. Maybe we were a little quick in cutting the expectation coaches, because they may actually be people that not only go out and capture some of those kids who are dropping out, but might actually be revenue creators, particularly paying their own salaries. And I, having been a high school principal, I also know that one of the things that probably went wrong with that is that high school principals saw that body there and started to get them to go do other things. Because we're really...
Oh, you don't do that.
We're good at that. Let me tell you, we are very good at diverting people from their true purpose and having them doing something that we think needs to get done. And such. So, I mean, maybe that's just one place to look to not only solve this about graduation rates, because we have those kids out there. We have those kids out there. Every year you go, what happened to Joey? Joey was here last spring. Where is he now? Well, Joey sitting at home. He's discouraged with school, you know, family issues, and he had to go to work, or who knows, you know. And we made some attempts for a little while there to go out and find Joey and get him back in school. And then what has to happen is somebody needs to be in place that is kind of like they were talking about Whale Branch, in Joey's face every single day. No, it wasn't Whale Branch. You were talking about Lotta High School up in Darlington County. In Joey's face every day saying, Joey, where were you yesterday? Or calling at 8:03 in the morning and saying, Joey, you're not in school. I went to your first period class. Why aren't you in school today? You know, and those kinds of things. We had a little bit of success with that with the overage 8th graders that we had out at ACE, because we hired some people that were not educators. They were community people who had pulled themselves up and stuff, and they did that every day. You know, they went, 3 kids are absent, right on the phone right away saying, where are you? Why aren't you at school? I'll come and pick you up if you missed the bus or something else happened, you know, and those kinds of things. They became their advocates, but they also were like their mother at school. You're not getting away with that.
So those persons perform certain functions.
Yeah.
Right? Is that what you're saying? Certain functions.
And we had to constantly keep them from being used to go do something else.
All right. Now let me ask you this question in the context of performing those functions. Does that person have to be a school and paid employee, or can we, I'm not saying all the time, but can we also make sure that when we describe the needs in terms of functions to be performed, identify non-school personnel or others to play that role.
Are you talking about somebody from another agency?
I'm talking about either someone from another agency or someone from another, when I say agency or group or organization, that's what I want to put out there.
I guess the first thing, I understand what you're saying, and I don't know whether this is a barrier or not. I think they need to be tied to the school somehow so they have that authority.
Okay, let me give you an agency example where I'm talking about the state intervention. We know that there is a mandatory attendance through at least age 16, and we know that there are agencies that serve at-risk families like DSS and others that should play a role in ensuring that certain things happen that are now stressing personal responsibility and those kinds of things. Well, if their job is to do that, can we find a way of attaching some of the functions that you're talking about that ties into what they are paid to do, understanding right now that they're taxed because their roles are really exploding. But the point is that people, when they do have contact, that they're helping to reinforce, I'm not saying it's the total answer, but helping to reinforce the very things that we're trying to achieve. Not the sole answer, but finding ways to plug in support of the concepts that we're talking about.
I understand what you're saying, Mr. Washington, and I think my experience, I guess, would tell me that I have a little hesitancy in the sense that if they aren't doing that all the time, then you're going to lose contact, because you lose contact with two ways. First of all, I don't know what Michael's doing because I'm not seeing him all the time, and Michael starts to disassociate because he said, you know, that guy used to hang around and pay attention to me, but now he's not, so I'm going to go off and do my thing now, kind of thing, because...
I'm not suggesting that it's the primary or only.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that there are holes that will be there, that the more people you have reinforcing the values that we're talking about, the better chance we have of getting the person on track.
The other point I wanted to make, and I know that we're in transition with this, but I know that Dr. Truesdale is working with United Way, who is looking to find 600 volunteers. Now think about that. That is a huge body of people to come in and work specifically with early grade reading, correct? And I know that they're developing a memorandum of understanding about how that's going to happen and what it's going to look like and that kind of thing. But I think that addresses exactly what you're talking about, Mr. Washington, of where we get that. And those are not going to be paid people. I mean, maybe there's going to be somebody at United Way that's being paid to coordinate the whole thing, but we're not talking about those 600 people are going to be paid. They're going to come in, they're going to get professional training, and then they're going to go into the schools and work with kids strictly in the lower grades. So it gets back to that systemic thing of we got to get it here. Exactly. But I also know that we've got kids in the pipeline that
need attention.
Yeah, we're going to lose them in August because nobody's paying attention to them, and they're going to walk. And
I agree. I agree with you. So
then it goes back to Mr. Campbell's point about that. We then have to deal with them in a different context somewhere down the road.
Exactly. I totally agree. I don't disagree with anything you said. Mr. Rivers? Yeah. Are you finished?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Okay. And then Ms. Bush and then Mr. Wilson.
And I still go back to my question 20, 30 minutes ago is, how do we redeem the time with these 25%ers? And let me share with you guys why this is so pressing on me as well as you guys. 2 Saturdays ago, my house was like a Christmas tree at night because of the young gentleman that got shot on Seaside Road. I think he was a teenager. And the kids in my community, how do you redeem the time? And they can't be throwaway kids. And each year, time is passing on. And we're talking about early childhood education. So when they don't get what they should get, when they should have gotten it, it only exacerbates the problem. And we've been talking about some of this stuff for some time. And let's acknowledge, we talk about college. Everybody's not going to college. Matter of fact, your plumber, and there are different skills that you need to survive in life. But there are some neighborhoods that when kids reach a point, they feel hopeless. And those of us who don't live in those neighborhoods may not see the importance or the chronic problem that we have. And usually that's in that 25% category. And I know you're talking about with NOC and partnerships, but in anything, there's only so much weight. There's so much weight that a foundation can handle.
I agree with that, too.
So when you start applying more weight to that foundation, at some point it's going to be a breaking point. So we who are in the school business, our responsibility should be, in my view, is to do our job. We should have partnerships, but let's not relegate should be our expertise to somebody else, because ultimately they have a limit too. Are we communicating?
Let me.
I'm not finished yet. I'm just, because sometimes when you do that, you throw us off.
I was answering your question.
Okay, but are we communicating? Yes or no?
I think so.
Okay. So then we go back to the 25%, and we talk about what happens in the state. Let's not kid ourselves. There are some people who don't want 25% or some percentage of kids to be well educated. Why? We live in a tourist environment, high profit, low wage. So if you can keep a certain amount of kids, I'm going to use this word, illiterate, not being able to function properly, do not train them for the global society that, as we talk about, as our mission. That's our job. So we keep talking about how much money we have, how much money we don't have, and that goes to the business model. But how do you value the potential of a child? How do you put a value on how much money we should spend, how much money we shouldn't spend, because we don't know what it takes for that product to mature and develop into being what it needs to be. So I don't want to preach at you, but it hurts me to see kids who sometimes drop out. You know why they drop out? They feel like school is a waste of time, because they don't see any jobs in the area. Is that right? No, it's not. But that's the reality that what we are dealing with here in Beaufort County. And like you said, Mr. Washington, we need to try to address the problem and not just continue to talk about it. For instance, with this NOC, is it at Penn Center? Where on St. Helena is one of these locations?
It's not. Right now it's Bluffton and Hilton Head.
So you say
the concept is Bluffton and Hilton Head.
So right now, it's not on St. Helena, correct?
It's not.
So even if we ramp it up next year, there's going to be a process of time to see the effectiveness of it.
Right.
But yet still, in that time, how do we redeem the time of these kids who these parents are sending these kids to our schools, and they expect the kids to be made whole, be made well. And we're sending out 25% of the kids, admittedly, coming out of our system, still or undereducated. And how do we deal with that? That's what I mean, so we got, all this is good, but there's some kids right now that the hourglass is tilting and the sand is falling out. And how do we fix that? Yes, sir.
And taking what I would consider to be the systemic approach in terms of our responsibility, there are some that will say, as a school district, we have no responsibility for 0 to 3.
Yes, we do.
No, just hear me out. We are mandated by law to do certain grades. Now, if you're realistic, and that's why I'm saying that there are those who take that position. Our position is we recognize the source of the problem. We want to get to the source of the problem. So if we're going to be effective, we've got to get to that source. While we aren't mandated to do it, that's why we partner with other people to help address it. Now, what we do have to do is getting to what Mr. Rivers is saying, that, yeah, what about the people already in the pipeline now? We already got people in the pipeline. Now, while we are addressing coming in, we've also got to address those who are in already. And again, the concept is, it's not just NOC per se, but what strategies, what approach, what groups can we get to help us, because some of those things that kids who are still in the pipeline right now are facing are beyond our control individually. So we've got to get people to recognize that in order for us to be effective, we need you to do certain things so that we can stand a better chance of being successful. So yeah, if they come to us, we'll do some things to get them excited. But they've got to remain excited. We've got to have the business community, all these other folks saying there's got to be an opportunity once we get them here. But we've also got to get them to address some home issues that they face. The depression that it's almost depression that you described. You said give up hope and stuff like that. We've got to get people to help us address that. That's beyond our capability alone. And all I'm asking us is to help develop those connections, those strategies, and just not talk about the problem again. How can we pull in folks to deal with those issues we know that are preventing us from getting the kids to be where we know they need to be, and that's all. And again, I'm just anxious to hear.
You asked a question about who's responsible. This is what the state constitution says, and I'm talking about the state of South Carolina. The current state constitution calls to provide for the maintenance and support of a system of free public schools open to all children in this state. So the state is not doing their job.
Yeah, but Mr. Campbell, what it
That's
says.
What the Constitution says.
Yeah, it says, and what's the interpretation by the General Assembly? And this is where the conflict comes in with Judge Cooper. The General Assembly says, yes, we have a free system of K through 12, or in some cases pre-K through 12, and that's our only responsibility. So the children before then is not our responsibility. What I hear Judge Thomas saying is that South Carolina, you have an obligation to do something to prepare those 0 to 3.
Judge Cooper.
You're not, right, Judge Cooper, I'm sorry. Judge Cooper, not Thomas. That's what got me off there. Judge Cooper, you is saying that you need to do something to address that 0 to 3 piece so that when they do come into the formal system, they're not as far behind as they are. Okay, so that's what I was talking about. And I've had people at the state level tell me it's not our concern in education now. We are not concerned with 0 to 3. That's not our problem. My problem is pre-K, where there's pre-K sponsored by us and up through 12. Now I had Ms. Bush and then Mr. Wilson, and again I just want us to work through and to hear everybody. And what can we come up with? What can we come up with? Ms. Bush?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to go back to something I said earlier when we were initially discussing this topic. And I mentioned the responsibility of the building principal and the school culture. Dr. Truesdale shared with the board on yesterday that in terms of the evaluation of administrators, one of the key things and goals that they're evaluated on is academic achievement. The school culture that's set by the leadership of that school plays a great role in the success of those students. If the culture of that school is high expectation for every student, meeting every child where they are, and gearing the academic program to reach that child, you're going to be seeing some success. It's been proven. Years ago, we had in our school system, I know in Hilton Head High School, we had homeschool coordinators that actually did, if a child did not come to school or did not show up at the first day or second or third day, someone was dispatched to that home to find out why. And not only just for that, on that one visit, but there was continuous contact. Maybe the family needed some other services. Maybe they weren't sure how to connect with the DSS or how to connect with some other services. That homeschool coordinator was that person who did that. That was a paid position at that school. But if we're not talking to our school leadership about productivity and performance and accountability in terms of their role with our students, then we're remiss in terms of moving our youngsters forward. The question I would have would be the action this board took a couple years ago in stating that every child that marches across the stage at graduation would meet not only state, but will meet all the state requirements for graduation. That helped, in my opinion, to boost graduation, because before that time we had children who walked across the stage who had the opportunity to return and complete their requirements, and many of them did not come back. And this year I did have a couple of phone calls from parents who were upset about that. But the numbers, we've seen the numbers that were reported by Dr. Oliphant, those numbers have seriously decreased. So that was a good move on our part. My question is, if we have a youngster who was a 9th grader entering high school, and during his 9th grade year, he only has 2 credits in his 9th grade year, we know that if there's no intervention at that point, he's not going to be successful in the 3 years that he has left in high school. And I've often wondered whether or not a graduation plan can be prepared for these young people that limited the electives. If a child needs help with other academic subjects, why is he put into an art class? Why is he put into some other electives when what he needs is the number of credits to get through graduation? Is there something we can do with the electives? So there needs to be a graduation plan for this youngster who we know in 9th grade only has 2 or 3 credits, and if we do not intervene right now, right then, he's not going to be successful, and he's going to eventually drop out. So can that be something we do and still maintain our credibility with the state?
Yes, ma'am, to a degree. The 24 units required for graduation are specified by State Board of Education regulation. So within that, yes, ma'am.
Okay.
But there are opportunities. Our students have to take 8 classes a year. That's 32. There's lots of opportunities for us to focus and double dip. You all may or may not remember our sharing with you a couple of years ago that for all students coming into 9th grade who are not where they need to be in English language arts, they have 2 classes. They double
up.
Yes,
okay.
ma'am. We double in mathematics as well for all students who are struggling learners. That's pretty much done in the 9th grade. You also will remember that Dr. Hayes and Mr. McCord shared with you yesterday an update on the overage for grade middle schoolers. We started that program in more diverse settings last year. We had it at ACE, and last year we have the overage for grade programs in several classes, several schools. As centers, they come from all the middle schools. So one of the push-pull strategies that this board, you will remember last year when we just discussed this, put in place was that students who are overage for grade coming in at the end of 8th grade, they are not allowed to go to the high school until they get their academics where they need to be. They're going to stay on the campus in the middle grades, accelerate English and math and social studies and science, and hopefully they can leapfrog over into the 10th grade and catch up with their peers. The National Dropout Prevention Center data indicate very clearly that students who fall behind their peers struggle to stay in school and to stay motivated. I'll share with you all a quick story of a student that I worked with very closely once who was having a great deal of trouble behaving in class. And I worked with the young man. He's a very, very angry young man. Peeled it back, what's the source of this problem? Why are you doing what you're doing? And come to find out, what he was truly furious about was he was in a 10th grade homeroom, and he says, I'm a junior. I am not allowed to take classes with my peers. I can't go to the things that juniors get to go to, like junior senior prom. I can't do this, I can't do that, because somebody put me in a 10th grade homeroom. No one had ever really helped this young man understand, you failed 10th grade. You're in a 10th grade homeroom. We are not always totally transparent with parents, and as Mr. Washington and Mr. Rivers were discussing a little while ago, I was thinking about the community. Several years ago, when we had some students who were not doing as they needed to do, and they weren't going to come to ELT. Remember when you all put in extended learning time? And there were some parents who said, my child's not coming. Well, I gave those names to Mr. Campbell. And I said, Mr. Campbell, they live in your neighborhood? And those parents brought their children. Sometimes it takes the community to say, this is a good thing. You need to be accelerating your learning. But we can do that, Ms. Bush, if we need to.
We need to. We need to. It's been proven that once that happens, it works. The other concern I have is the 2.0 policy that was put in place by this board. That should reap some success because with our athletes, and I'm looking forward to at least going through the first year of that and seeing how that works.
And it will be bumpy.
Oh, I'm sure it will.
It will be bumpy.
But it needs to happen.
And so the first
It's good for
football
kids.
night, ready for your phones to ring.
Yeah, we played Bluffton in our first game.
You played Bluffton on your first game?
Yeah, on the 17th, August.
If two of your key players are not playing on each team, I can see it right now.
I'm ready for the phone calls. We're not doing these kids any service.
All right, Mr. Bush, I'm sorry. Anything else?
No, I think what I really want to reinforce is we have to seriously own every child. And if our school culture is not about owning every child and high expectation for every child, this could be a student with a 4.0 average. If this child can be excelled to go beyond that, we need to push him. And if it's a child that's even below that, but each child deserves the best opportunity for academics that we have in our district, and sometimes I don't see that. And I think it needs to come from our school culture.
Had Mr. Wilson and then Mr. Speaks.
I guess I look as a school board member and say, and maybe I use this philosophy in business also, I call it the 80-20% rule. If for 20% of the effort you can take care of 80% of the problem, do it, and then skin to the next thing. We as a district have done a great job of changing our structure and developing teachers and standardizing courses or putting in new courses in and modifying and training to make sure that every child has the opportunity to learn. And we're seeing that in our test results. Unfortunately, when we take a look at the ones not meeting state standards, we've seen improvement in that area, but not drastic improvement. We've just seen a little bit. And we do, as a board, have to concentrate. What Michael says, we can't let it go forever. We can't let those kids go forever, because they're the ones we're losing now. That's a more difficult situation. Now, to have a kid turn 16 and not come back to school, and nobody follow up, probably is the worst thing we can do. I don't care if I, as a board member, have to go and knock on 10 doors to see if I can find, I'm willing to do that. I don't know if some of the social workers, we're not talking about during the whole year, but at the beginning of the year, we give them a few students. I don't care if old coaches, let me just say this. I am a big believer that sports can have a major impact on children. My kids did not live in a town that we had as much poverty and as many troubled students. However, there were pockets and there were places where I've asked for a troubled child. and I know I've impacted their lives. Somehow, maybe we have to see if the coaches around here, I mean, when you have a kid and he plays with you for a season, and you know he's on that cuff, make sure you keep on following him. Go to some games and praise him. Give him the motivation. The discipline and structure a coach gives many of these children who don't have it at home is something that most kids really want but don't have. So is there a way that we can work with our youth sports coaches and talk to them about some of the problem children and get more of them to follow up a little bit with that child after the season's over, to maybe be a mentor for him? I think if a child is not coming to school at 16, and again, it doesn't mean they have bad parents. It's like parents have never been brought up and don't know how to raise children. Many of them are very religious people, though. Can we use the clergy for some of these where we know the family is a religious family? And you can't use them all the time, but there's certain times that maybe we can go out and use because they're out to help people in their community. I'd like to see us take one or two classes where we have pockets of children who are not performing and see if we could create a good mentor program for some of those children. Let's see what that does. We as a board keep on talking about 0 to 3 and pre-kindergarten, but there's a lot of kids past that point that we have to start dealing with. And we got to look at trying a lot of different things. But I don't care what it comes back to, when a child is not performing, or a child has behavior problems, or a child is not motivated, it's usually because he has no adult there to help him get motivated. And I think if we show that we can do some programs to get those children motivated by coaches, clergy, ex-teachers. I mean, you know, I've known teachers who have taken up kids as a project and follow them through his whole life, just because they know that this kid has something inside, but he wasn't using it, and have a whole lifetime impact upon that child. There's a lot of people probably have done that in the past in this community. And if we can prove that we can develop something and then get some more people involved, because it's not just education, folks, that we have to teach these kids. It's life skills and behavior which leads them to want to do better things and be educated. And we can't let them continue to just move along. And that's where we have to be a little bit more creative. And maybe this is an area that maybe we have to have a seminar where we bring some clergy people in, some coaches, some, you know, etc., to try to throw out ideas. I don't know the community as well as some of you people do, but one of the kids I helped is now flying around in a private jet. Married a very nice girl.
Me?
That's a little harder project. Can't take the old dog to a chair. But I look at that and say, if he would have went the direction he was going, where would he have been? And he was a bright kid. But just no direction, no discipline, wild and crazy, and no respect for anybody. And if you can't teach him respect, you can't teach him discipline, you can't teach him self-worth, then you're not going to teach him. And that's important. And I think we need more community leaders, not just to try to deal with them on a paper skill and an education skill, but more life training that will get them there.
Mr. Speaks and Mr. Rivers, and then I want to get...
Just want to follow up on a couple of things. One is what Ms. Bush talked about. It's a shame that some student in the 9th grade only have 2 credit in our core courses. Well, I think that we have things in place where we should be able to determine whether that student is going to fail that particular class or not. I think that once the teacher noticed this, that teacher should be able to submit that to the academic advisor. Then academic advisor then contact that student and work on that before that student receive a failing grade at the end of that semester. And I know that we have the technology to do that. Now, going back to the 0 to 3 or 0 to 5 or what have you, well, first of all, it starts in the home. Secondly, from the home, then it deal with the community. If that parent has some children there and it's not, and that community should be able to participate with those children, try to give them as much things that are beneficial to them for the academic goals. Then that student goes to the school. Once they get to the school level, then we have a big responsibility to educate them. Then once they leave the school, it comes back to the parent. The parents must reinforce what have transpired in the school, and the community should also be able to work. So as a parent, community, school, parents, community, school, to get those students. We can talk about bringing all these things in and bringing all these things in, but if you don't have that parents, community, and schools involved, it's over.
Mr. Rivers?
Yeah, and I agree with a lot that's been said, but my mind goes back to something the principal told me maybe 4 or 5 years ago. There was a child that was acting up, and the parent came to the school to see about the child. And the mother started crying because the mother was saying, look, I don't have a good education. I'm sending you to school so that you can get a good education. So we got to acknowledge, too, that some of the parents, they have a heart full of love, but they're expecting the hospital to take care of the child. And George, you mentioned something about youth coaches. And let me show you how business can have an effect on how kids receive services. In our county right now, if you wanted to go to summer day camp this year with PALS, the cost was astronomical. To participate sometimes in sports now, it's not like back in the earlier days, each community would play against each community. So you know, those days are gone.
Get someone to sponsor a bus and a truck and take us.
Yeah, on the back of the truck. You know, but the times have changed. But yet still, these kids now are idle. You know, and we talk about poverty. One of the things that gets me is that sometimes we don't realize that these kids are far from stupid. I mean, you're talking about kids who are able to do pharmaceutical measurements in their head. They know how to market their supplies. They know how to deal with the supply chain, public relations. They know the science of how to deal with their products. So these kids are far from stupid. They have all the skills that you learn in business schools, but how do you redirect that into a positive direction? And when we talk about relationship with the school and kids, now I'm talking about St. Helena, for instance. A principal that's comfortable going to the oyster roast or the fish fry or the crab brawl that may be down in the neighborhood that has a bad name, but when the community sees, and when the parent sees, and when the kid sees that that principal is comfortable, it's getting dark, but we're having a good time, he or she doesn't mind staying after dark, and may not be lights under the trees, that says to that community, that says to the kids, you know what, this person really cares about us. It's not just something that is done for public relations. It's not just something that's done for, you know, a show. And these are the things that will make, in my view, make a very tangible difference in how kids respond, how people react to kids, and it may be going on in some areas. This name brings up a bad connotation sometimes in this district, but people can say what they want about Dr. Davis, But one thing that she had the ability to do was to communicate with the least of these and to make them feel like they were the most important of these, if that makes any sense. I know that's not good English, but that's critical, because one thing, we ain't got no clergy in here beside myself, but kids can pick up on BS pretty quick.
That's right.
They can tell, and that BS is blowing smoke. Now, I ain't cussing. You know, so we got to be very careful, because sometimes, you know, we talk about all this stuff, but when it comes down, I think yesterday we talked about real talk.
Yeah.
Real talk. We gotta reach these kids where they are. And guess what happens? You said about life skills. Guess what's the biggest life skill? Survival.
Well, I understand that.
So when we don't give them what they should be getting in school, that's when they graduate to something else to try to survive. And we play a part in that. I mean, that's when you would see people down at DSS, because they're trying to do stuff that may not be totally legal, but they're trying to support their family. And let me take this back to some of you who are new to this area. When Fred was coming up, and most of us are over 50, parents had options if they didn't have a good education. They could go in the river, they could farm, they could do other things to help support their family. All those avenues are gone now. And the only avenue that they really have is education. You know, so there are a lot of areas that we can improve in. But at the school level, that principal who is able to connect with the community, man, you know, you would rather that principal handle you than them telling your parents. But now a lot of it's completely different. I mean, you know, some principals try to conceal what's going on with the kids to make the parents think that the children are doing fine, and at the end of the year when the kids didn't pass, it's like total pandemonium, you know. But business models are good, but don't give me a Maserati and know I can't afford the gas. You know, it's not going to help me get to where I want to go.
I add one thing to Michael. When you talk about
to the discussion.
Well, the discussion, you know, when you talk about the kids not participating because of the increased fees, it's worse than that, Michael, because I know a person that's involved with the free lunch programs or free meal programs, and those kids, many of those kids who are coming from poverty areas were getting a good meal every day, and now that they can't attend those programs in the summertime, the number of meals being served is down greatly. Because, and now not only are they not having the sports opportunity, but they're also having the nutrition and hungry problems because they do not, they cannot participate in those programs.
And then that's when they come and breaking our houses and stuff.
But I asked the question, does that relate to education?
Sure does.
All day.
Okay. Now, and if that relates to education, some of that goes beyond our responsibility, I want to say direct responsibility. And that's one of the reasons we have got to work with other people whose direct responsibility is to address those. And they understand that there's a connection to what they do and what we do. And all I'm asking is that let's try to find ways that we can connect those and make that a part of our school operating culture. Since we're talking about culture right now, we're talking about having the environment that leads to success, then how do we develop this to become of a part of our daily operation and expectation?
Fred, if we have a community meeting, Parks and Rec should be invited to.
Okay. Yes, sir.
The meeting that we are having at ACE with
on the 7th?
On the 7th, I think a lot of what we discussed this morning, we can combine all those and talk about.
Talk to the folks who putting together the agenda, and make sure that because there's a limited limited time,
Yeah.
and so we need to, because I know they're focusing on graduation. Is that what it is? The breakfast?
September 7th, Mr.
Yes.
Chairman.
I mean, our keynote speaker is the same lady that was here last week, correct?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Dr. Betty Molina Morgan, who's the Executive Director of Grad Nation, also former National Superintendent of Schools from somewhere in Maryland. And, you know, the concept of the day is for her to speak, and then us be at tables broken out. You know, the board isn't going to sit at one table. The board's going to sit at 10 or 11 different tables. And same with county council members and representatives from Jasper and all that kind of thing. And to have conversations at those tables that are going to be recorded either by a school principal that's sitting there or teacher of the year, somebody from the staff who's going to capture the conversation. So I'm hoping that the kind of things that we're talking about this morning are brought up there and discussed, and what ideas do people have out there, you know, to respond to the issues that we're talking about.
Can I ask you a question? Who are notifying the folks?
Carol, our Community Services Coordinator, Mr. Campbell, Carol McMillan, is handling the cards and everything, and we've just cleared the date with Dr. Washington, Dr. Vashti Washington on Wednesday, and then we've gotten the addresses in from Jasper.
Okay, so when will we know who's going to be there? As far
Oh,
as
yes, sir.
participants?
The RSVPs are, invitations.
Okay, all right. Yeah. Okay, that's
He
what.
said they wanted to have the invitations go out on August 1.
Thank you.
And then we have them back 2 weeks later.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We fully expect that there's going to be people who never RSVP to us and then show up that morning.
Yeah.
And we'll have to deal with that. And it is open to the public. I mean,
Okay.
the list I saw Tuesday night that had been developed probably had 150 people on it already.
Yeah, okay.
Again, what I want to do before we close out, we're getting ready to go, what action steps? I'm interested, and the reason I want to have a discussion, some suggested action steps, strategies that translates into some action. Now, one of the things that I've heard is that we need to make sure that the culture in our district includes what Mr. Speaks talked about, the notion of the parent-community school connection or continuous connect, that we've got to have that. So there is a cycle of reinforcement, that you get something at home, and someone needs to make sure that what's being said at home, and again, there's some other people who have some responsibilities for those kinds of things. And again, that's why I go back to the state level in some instances, weighing in on that, that there are some things, some values, some good practices and everything that's done. Then when they come to us, we need to do our part of making sure that those kids' minds and everything, I mean, the community first reinforces what's happening at home, whether it's the church or some other, and then when they come to the school, then that goes. Yes, sir.
Can I piggyback on what you're saying too, about the home? But let me give you an example. Most of us who grew up here, we grew up on pigtail, fat back, and all that stuff.
Ham hock.
But once we got better informed and better educated, we modified the way we eat.
Speak for yourself.
I said some of us. I mean, I got the evidence, you know. So what I'm saying then is, it still comes back to the professionals being able to change behavior, because fat back, pigtail, and all that stuff, it tastes good. But if you want to live longer, you realize that your heart can't take it. So we have to still be in the business of realizing that parents are still sending these kids to us so that they can be healthy. And let me go back to the church situation. Sadly, there's probably only about 20% of people that attend church regularly. So right then, if you're only focusing on the church community, you're losing 80% of the people. And guess what? Well, if you want to take it to the next level, a lot of the people that go to church sometimes, their kids may be in college or gone. So you still have a large percentage of people who don't even go to church who have kids in our school. You know, so, and another part of this that we don't like, sometimes there are community leaders who don't go to church, dropped out of school, and they're teaching, or let me show you this a different way, they're influencing some of our students. So we got all these dynamics that we have to deal with, and we got to, you know, everything, we want to fit everything, and Dr. Schuster says this a lot, we got to be able to step outside of the box, because sometimes we want to just fit everything in this little box because it's convenient, but, man, we, you know.
But I guess the challenge to me, and because we are education focused, and we are supposed to teach how to problem solve. I mean, how do people learn how to, that's the business we're in. Yeah. And my position is that we set a tone around this table of how we go about doing that. Mm-hmm. Now, I totally agree with you about those levels of involvement with church, but one of the things that a church can do, even if their membership is limited, if they're in a certain community, they're supposed to be about mission. At least most churches have a mission focus or function. And there are some churches who have decided we're going to do something to impact the community. Some. I'm not saying all. And all I'm suggesting is that we have to be out there advocating when we know certain things exist. Again, if we want to problem solve, if we know that this is the case, what's our option? Do we accept it if we have knowledge of something? Do we accept what that is? Or do we use the so-called education we have and try to figure out a way to address the problem?
Something that's prompting my spirit. One thing that we got to be reminded of too, a lot of times, and I ain't trying to preach at y'all, but a lot of times,
I'm gonna pass the hat in a minute. Go ahead.
When we talk about church, we get it twisted. Because a lot of times we talk about church as being a building where people go and worship, but the reality is churches, each one of us who have made a commitment or made a decision to be a Christian. So then if each one of the individual churches, which is a body, the church is just a body of believers, but the real church are individuals. And if individuals would then do what needs to be done, and not just when it's convenient, you know, and that's one of the biggest problems, and the Bible talks about it. One of the biggest places where you're going to find hypocrites at is in church. Now, we're talking Matthew 15, somewhere up in there. Hypocrites, you're like dead man bones, you know, you guys are full of soup. He didn't say that, but anyway. but the sad part about it is we sometimes, politicians and elected officials are so busy trying to promote themselves that they forget that the real mission is about kids and how are we going to help the least of these, and except you come as a little child. I mean, we forget about our main mission, and if we do that, guess what's going to happen when we get old? Guess who those kids that we didn't educate, guess who they're going to be preying on? And I ain't talking about on their knees either. You know, it's going to be us.
It's an E and not an A.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so specifically, yes, sir.
And what Michael is saying is right. And to get to those folks, you got to go out in the community. You know, because like he said, about 20% goes to church.
Maybe some roaches there, maybe all kinds of stuff.
That's right. And so you got to get out in the community and talk to those parents and talk to those children. You know, we had a thing it's finished tonight at our church, and that is the first time I've seen that many nothing but males. That's all, just young men in our church. The church was packed with black males. You know, and that's how you get to the kids. The other thing is that when we have this meeting at ACE, we should invite these politicians into our communities. Let them see what is going on in the community, see the communities, and see the kids.
And before it's election time.
Right.
So what I do want to make sure that I heard from the group,
Mr.
one
Washington,
thing that we
I
have
have my hand up
embraced
for about
is
20
the
minutes.
concept
Oh, I'm sorry.
again, I want to restate this, adopting the culture that promotes parent, community, school connections, that and reinforcement. So we want to have some strategies, we want to have some actions, and develop some specific things that tie into that connection, or to that circle. Is that what I'm hearing us say?
That's one of the things you heard us say.
Yeah, okay.
And the school leadership, go ahead.
What other things specifically are we talking about that we can at least give direction and hopefully support to the district, saying this is what we think works?
I think what you heard me say, Mr. Chairman, is not only the culture is to have the school, home, and the community involved, but to have your school leadership, the culture of that school from your leadership that permeates through the staff for every child. That our role here is not to lose any one of you. And what you put in place in that school are efforts toward that end. But it has to come from the school leadership.
Okay. Anything else?
Mr. Speaks had something.
Well, I'm gonna say what I've said repeatedly. We've made some really nice, I'm sorry, Mr. Speaks, did I just step all over you? Okay.
You were at this microphone, we could hear you anyway.
We've made some wonderful gains, but I insist, and I warn us, I think we all know it deep inside, that the kids who are still struggling are the ones with the biggest, whether they're handicaps or just learning issues from lack of support at home or whatever. Whatever are the things that are causing them to lag behind. They are the ones that have the biggest problem and are going to take more. We're not going to get done by doing less. We're going to have to do more. Somehow, we've got to find the way to do more, think out of the box.
Define more. See,
I'll define it right now. I'll define it.
Okay.
Spend more individual time with those students, addressing their particular learning problems, filling in the gaps, whatever it is they were missing. If mom and dad weren't able to read books to them at night, I don't know what all the things are. It's such an extensive list, but that's what's got to be addressed, and somehow, and I understand we've got fiscal limitations, so, and I'm not saying people aren't thinking out of the box. We've just got to keep thinking out of the box on how we solve that problem, because that's what those students need. I mean, we talk about these students needing caring adults to help them resolve their problem, and it's got to be somebody that's looking at them in a total picture, not just about my only responsibility is to teach you reading. Okay, they've got to see that yes, they're teaching me reading, but they care about me actually learning how to read.
And what I'm saying to you is, I've got the what, spend more, and now it's the how. I'd like us to now focus on how. Again, if we're going to solve the problem, help solve the problem, then I want to get to an element of, okay, how?
Well, look at the successful,
we've
look
had
at the
some stuff
successful
around.
endeavors around the nation. Okay, if you look at the Harlem Children's Project and things like that, they stepped out of the box and they got laser focus on things. Okay, they sat down and said, okay, yes, the law says we got to do all these things. Now, how are we going to do all those things inside this? Okay, which is they don't know how to read. So,
Teach them how to read.
why are we spending? I don't want anybody to misinterpret what I'm about to say. Why are we spending time on art or something else if the student can't read yet?
That's what I said.
Now, I'm not saying throughout the art programs. I hope nobody takes that as my meaning.
Mr. Bill Evans' email address is.
My point is, you know, there's some old methods that might apply to this. There used to be a time when we taught some of the content areas in reading, so that we were teaching reading skills, and the kids were getting the content that they needed, whether it was in social studies or science and that kind of thing. I think we still do that in some cases, but I think there's times when we've got teachers who sit down and say, oh, my job is to teach you about the Civil War, okay? And the fact that you can't read the book, you know, that you got to go over to this teacher to find out how to read the book, kind of thing. And my concern is that, you know, there's things like that. That's just one such a small example. But how do we reach out and become more individualized with those students? Because that's what it takes. You can't do it as a one size fits all kind of thing.
All right, before we close out, Mr. Speaks was next, Miss Bush, Mr. Wilson.
I was getting ready to relax. You know,
We're going to go toward that.
you have people in the community, have children. You have some did not graduate from high school. You have some that graduated from high school. You have some that received BS, BA, MS, MA, all that, but they don't know everything and every subject matter. And that's what I hit the community, because a parent should not be afraid to ask Mr. Campbell, you're the physicist, my child having problem with physics. Would you be able to help my child? I may say, Mr. Campbell, with Mr. Speaks, my child have problem in mathematics. I can't help that child with that. Would you help my child? That's how things work in a community. You know, because, and then you can see that you see the connection that the community have with each other to help those children. And if you don't have it, and you're afraid to ask, or you're afraid to participate in that particular family, so I'm not going to touch that family, and I'm not going to do this, then we're not hurting that family, we're hurting those children. You need to get in that community, and if they ask you for help, do it. And let me tell you something. I do a lot of tutoring too. I don't ask for any money. If they say you want to pay me, I say you don't pay me for anything. I say my pay is that those kids be successful in those classes. That's what I want from you.
Ms. Bush and Mr. Wilson.
Mr. Campbell, Mr. Washington, you asked for the how.
Yes.
The how, for me, goes right back to the schools. We have touted this district as being data-driven. Teachers knowing where their students are, principals knowing where their school is in terms of the data. Then every teacher in that school should know where the students are in their classrooms. Okay. Just like Ms. Anand did at Hilton Head High School when she identified those youngsters who had not passed all parts of the exit exam, and mounting an effort to zero in on that, the schools can do the same thing. Those youngsters who are not successful, every principal should know who they are, every teacher in the classroom teacher should know who they are, and there should be a mounted effort to move that child forward. When I mentioned moving kids out of the electives that they don't know how to read and doubling up on their reading or social studies, it can be done. But to me, it goes back to the school culture, it goes back to the leadership in those schools, and knowing and identifying your children. You should know where your children are in your schools. And I think each principal that's worth his or her salt knows and can identify those students who are having problems in their schools and who need extra efforts. Your coaches know who those students are. If they would man up or woman up and say, Johnny can't play until he or she gets their grades or their academics online. It has to take, it's a personal relationship with your students that's going to improve this whole situation. If you don't have that, it's not going to work.
But at the same time,
I have Mr. Wilson.
Okay, based on what Laura said and what other people talked about, one of the things we talked about is the teacher. We sometimes are sending teachers into schools of poverty, and they've never really faced poverty and have no idea about the culture.
Hello.
I can tell you that 3 years ago or 4 years ago, Gail Wages put on a thing for the new orientation, but it was only an hour and a half, talking about, because she came from poverty, and what you're going to see when these kids come in, what some of the differences are of a child from poverty versus a person coming from middle class or upper class. I think we should develop a program somehow for professional development that's more than an hour and a half, but people who are coming into our region to teach into poverty schools have to do some professional development in this area here, because if they have a better understanding of the community, if they have a better understanding of what they, don't let them take a year or two to learn it. Let's get them a little bit more polished before they get in there, because she opened my eyes up to a lot of different things, and I thought it was one of the more interesting things I've ever seen as a board member.
Okay, Mr. Rivers, and then Superintendent.
Yeah, George said something there that makes a lot of sense, and Laura was saying something too. Dr. Truesdale, do we still have a relationship with Penn Center?
We do.
Where we take teachers out at the beginning of the year? Do we still do that?
We do. Not all schools have gone this last year, but they have done it.
Okay, because in order to understand a person, you almost have to have some knowledge of that person, experience or relationship or something, and that is critical. But Laura said something about moving forward, but it can't be at the expense of time, the kids' time. And we might don't want to acknowledge it. You definitely don't want to know about it, Dr. Truesdale, because you'll take somebody to prayer. But there are teachers, there are situations where students are moved on from one grade to the next, and then the problem then becomes when they get to the next grade. You know, they go from elementary to middle school, and then when they get to middle school, there's this like, wow, how did this child get here? But we got to deal with that issue too, because moving forward, it's good if you are ready. But moving forward just for the sake of moving, and I understand what you mean, Laura. I'm not debating what you said. But sometimes if you move a kid forward and they're not really ready or prepared, that's a better word, prepared, you're hurting that child. And you know, that's where I'm from. So I'm 1/11 of this big pie, and my slice comes from St. Helena. And there are kids who have been moved from elementary to middle school, and when they get to middle school, it's like in a different country. So who is at fault? Is it the child? Is it us for moving the child along before they were ready to make sure numbers look good? I mean, so you talk about what we do. There are a lot of things that we do, but the first thing we got to do is take responsibility. I think Laura just said that. We got to take responsibility for every child, and it can't just be about us looking good at the expense of children doing bad. Right.
So I'm going to push on you all a little bit, may I?
Push.
We started yesterday with a little tone set, and I said I was going to challenge you to get outside of your box. It isn't always about more staff, more people. Let's think about some tools you already have. Mr. Washington talked extensively about involving the community. So one of the things that we have is we have some mentor programs that are they're personal, time intensive. But we also have opportunities. Remember, we talked yesterday about our students will each have their own space, their own Edmodo space. They can also have their own mentor, e-mentors. We have virtual summer school. We can extend the time that a student is learning. They don't have to just be learning inside the classroom. With students who need help with mathematics, Khan Academy, and there's several others that are cropping up, that there are small snippets to help students in other ways. We can use technology to our benefit, because what we're doing is putting we maybe just do, I don't even see here's one, iPad. Here, this little iPad is going to make, laptops are one thing, they get cumbersome. We had at Beaufort High School last year, a laptop initiative where we had the Eagle Scholars program. And at the end of a couple of months, our students said to our principal, those are big and cumbersome. We don't want to carry those around. The power that we're putting in the hands of students during the school day in the middle schools where we're getting them excited about learning, we can put our refurbished desktops into community centers like the Neighborhood Outreach Connection, like Boys and Girls Club, like the Y. We're looking at neighborhood coalitions of perhaps churches to come together and sort of things like that. We can use the hardware and software now that we have to reach out and make those happen. I wanted the board to know, the reason I brought that in to push on you a little bit is that right now we have an RFP out for the early warning system for our dropout students. How do we know the most at-risk characteristics? Our kindergarten teachers and our fourth grade teachers could tell you which of our students are going to be at risk in high school. Well, there's now a very sophisticated, easy way to do that with analytics. There are computer programs that are written. They don't cost a lot of money. They flag a kid. And then, Mr. Evans, that flag goes on to the next year's teacher. We do have, Reverend Mr. Wilson, programs for students. The Children of Poverty program that Ruby Payne has been very famous for. We've had that training in our county for a long time. What we have to do is get very specific about making sure that our teachers have all of the knowledge that they need. We invest a lot in our teacher development and our staff development, not just that, leaders development as well as paraprofessionals. You all have been really insistent with us on all the training that is absolutely required of every staff member. And Jackie has it on a matrix. We started out with the bloodborne pathogens, and it goes to darkness to light, and now it goes to copyright and other things. There are ways to make sure that every teacher goes through online training in the summer in their own comfort of their own home before they come to school. They don't have to be pulled out for things. Think about new and different methods. It's not always about more people, because Phyllis was out of the room when they were talking about spending more money for people. So I'm defending. We have to live within the tough fought where we are. We've cut 200 positions so that we could protect the classroom. Those 200 positions, part of them were teachers, but it was only 1 year that you all had to go up on class size. When Jackie did the staffing ratios, we only went up by 1 student at the elementary, 1 at the high, 1 at the middle in our staffing ratios. So we've been able to weather, so far, the economic downturn. What I want to be sure we're doing is really using the power of the materials we have.
Okay. Mr. Evans, before we go to lunch, because we're going to break for lunch. Yes, sir, quickly.
Well, maybe just a point of clarification. My point about the expectation coaches and stuff was not that we spend more money. I'm making the point that maybe they pay for themselves, just like our risk manager pays for herself. You know, if they're able to bring back in and keep in 30 kids who weren't going to come to school, does that cover their salary? When I talk about having to do more with some of the students who are struggling, I'm not talking about necessarily needing more teachers. I'm talking about maybe we just simply need to look at how we use the staff we have to work with those kids, and so it doesn't have to cost more.
Well,
I'll just give you one hint from a cost standpoint.
Anyone else before we go to lunch?
If you bring those students in, we're going to need more teachers, and we don't get paid from the state a cost per student, so it's going to cost us more money. Yeah, we don't get money per student.
Yeah, but the kids are more.
I'm not saying that. I'm just saying it's not a cost savings or break even. That doesn't mean we shouldn't be doing it. But when you're bringing, if we got X amount of dollars per student, every student came in here, we'd have more money to spend. But we won't have that.
Well, I think what's being asked, what I hear is, can we get an analysis done? And if it says nope, that's not one of the things that's cost effective or can pay for itself, which is your question. Can it pay for itself? Then guess what? That's off the table. But the way we do close.
Should be off the table. I don't know, just because it's not cost effective. I mean, cost savings, let's put it that way. Maybe there's other places to save.
All right, go ahead, Mr. Rivers.
You know, and I think, what's the guy's name who just died this week? Covey?
Covey, Stephen Covey.
And he talks about starting with the end in mind. And if the end in mind is to graduate all kids and to make all kids have a quality education, then we can't limit ourselves financially in the beginning because we don't know what it's going to take to get to the end. And when we use the business model sometimes, we are so concerned about our limitations financially, but that also bleeds into limiting kids educationally. You know, so we got to be very careful because we are dealing with lives here. This ain't no nuts and bolts and put it in this bin and, you know, I work in the industry. We're dealing with, and let me say this before, a lot of times people who talk about money now, they'll also say stuff like, well, I pulled myself up by my bootstrap and all this kind of stuff. If it wasn't for the middle class and these same people who's, you know, that's where you came from. So now we have gotten so sophisticated politically, you know, this philosophy of cut, 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 cut. You can only cut so much before there is a diminishing return. And like Mr. Evans said, you know, what the expectations coaches, we got to be very careful because it's all connected. Some of us may not be around living or whatever or in this area, but if we don't educate these kids now, somehow down the road, even the ones we're trying to redeem the time on, we're going to pay the consequences. I mean, it's just because everything's interconnected.
Can I say something?
Wanted to
before we
get
go to
this.
lunch?
Yes, sir.
And like Mr. Rivers said, Mr. Evans, we are paying the cost now for not doing what we should have been doing in years past. We have, you could go down, so if you get a chance, anybody in here, go down to the jail and visit the jail. Some of those, the majority of those kids came from our school. Go to Columbia to the prison. You know, so you're still paying for it, but you're paying a lot more. You know what it costs to keep a person in jail? This smoking marijuana from, you got kids.
That's for the health, though.
But you got kids up incarcerated up in Columbia right now for smoking some marijuana or some crack, cocaine. It costs anywhere from $22,000 a year to $50,000. Now you figure it out. Who is stupid?
As a body, one of the things I hope we can do, and we can demonstrate, is that sometimes you have to re-examine what you do and how you apply your resources. And all I'm saying, and the exercise I want us to do, is to think about things that if they haven't been working, and we haven't been getting the kinds of results that we think we could get, then why don't we rethink how we apply what we do have? And we demonstrate that we can get a little more out of what we do have, and then guess what? Then we are in a better position to get even more if we fall short of what our goals are. I'm a believer in that, and it's worked for me in the past, that I'll show you, I'll redo some things, and I'll show you that I'm getting the maximum out of what I do have, and here are the results that I'm getting from it. And if you want more, you got to invest more. You don't get more with not making more investments if you have maximized what you do have already. So with that, let's take a quick break, because, yes, sir, Mr. Burns?
Yes, sir. I like to, sometimes we forget, you know, where we came from. I heard a few comments, you know, coming to that. Now, I also heard some about certain ones of, you know, the schools are not making state standards. I just don't want us to forget about choice programs. I got one question. Is it true or is it not true that choice programs take away from schools that are not making state standards or lower performing schools? Could that be true or could it not be true? Could be true or not. That's all I'm asking.
My answer is that my answer is that it could be, but I'm not sure that that is actually the case here in our district.
I'm not saying that.
No, I'm saying it could be. It definitely well could be.
Right.
can I
Wait,
add
wait,
one?
wait, finish.
No, I just want to just say this, Fred.
No, he hasn't finished.
Okay, well, no, but to answer his question. Okay. I'll wait till, okay.
And make no mistake, I believe that the administration is doing a good to great job. Now, I do believe that. But I want to be factual about this thing. We got to understand that we got to look at the real picture. The fact is, if you take the cream of the crop, what happens to the crop?
That's right.
Crop dies, right?
That's right.
So I'm not saying that bad schools is bad because they're just totally bad. Sometimes what I'm saying, sometimes you can cipher some of the good away from that.
Right.
And then that lessens the ability for that other school to flourish. I mean, just a thought.
You just hit it out the park.
We're gonna get the lunch very soon, Mr. Wilson, you finished?
Okay, all I'm saying is you may have one
You just
school
hit it
go
out the
down
park.
in value, and another one go up, but we still have the problem that we have students that we're not educating, and I don't care what buildings the numbers are in, we still have to deal with those students. Like if some students want to have enrich their education by a choice program, and they're the top students, they move to another school, that school may have higher numbers, and the other school may have lower numbers, but the thing is, those students we're not educating are still the ones we have to deal with. We just take some of the mask off and see that, but it's still those students you have to educate.
I declare us break for lunch, and we can continue this during lunch. We can continue the discussion during.
You hit it out the park.
You're going to find, when I start talking about what we're looking for performance expectations, there's a state expectation of 20% efficiency gains from 2000 to 2020. That's a state requirement, or that's what the state's goals are. What you see right here from 2005 to 2012, we've already met about a little more than a 40% improvement in energy use. So just want to show you that we're continuing to make improvements and use less energy per square foot. That's kind of the key matrix. But to do that, one of the things is we have invested a lot with energy grants and some other things in the past years. We need to make sure we keep our eye on that ball because we've gotten some of the low-hanging fruit. It's going to continue to get harder, but we got to keep going and keep making improvements. You can bring up that PDF. So what I'd like to talk about is kind of this performance expectations. If you've seen that, I've done a rewrite, and one of the things I've done is incorporated the Energy Star guidelines. Energy Star has a program for K through 12 schools, and basically what they've got is a 7-step principle for measuring energy reduction. Can you do it so it's just full screen? And yet you'll see they're listed actually here. You know, they have make a commitment, assess performance, set goals, create an action plan, then implement that plan, evaluate your progress, and then recognize achievement. And what it shows, just up at the top. You just hit up at the top, the full page. Oh, it's not doing? No, on the PDF. Right here. Right there. There we go. So pretty much you start by making a commitment, and the whole concept is it's a never-ending process. You set goals, you create your plan to meet those goals, you implement the action plan, see how you've done, award yourself, and circle back around. And for the most part, we've done this once. We've really had a program going with Jack since 2006, and it's been extremely successful. Like we said, almost a 44% reduction in energy. Now we have to circle back around. We've gotten some of the low-hanging fruit. We've got to evaluate really where we are and see what our next goals are that we need to meet to achieve. And that's one of the things the Energy Star program does for us. It's kind of set up to benchmark yourself against other schools and other school systems throughout the country. And so one of the things I'd like to present to you or see if you'd be interested in us going forward with the Energy Star program and registering with it. No cost, it's free, it's by the government. There are 4 schools in South Carolina right now that are in the program already. I believe Bamberg's one, I think Greenville's another, kind of scattered throughout. But there's not a lot of participation in South Carolina, but what it does is it'll allow and give you benchmarking tools for other school systems of your size and location, just see where you are, because that's important when it comes to setting goals, because we really haven't set hard goals that we need to meet, and that's one of the, I feel like, our next step.
What's the cost and what's the benefit?
There is no cost. Well, the only cost is time to input our data and put it in there, and the benefit is that, like right now, the state says by 2012 we're supposed to have 2020 we're supposed to have a 20% energy. We've already blown the socks off that.
Sounds like a no-brainer. Is there a motion?
I'd make a motion we join the Energy Star.
The Energy Initiative at no cost.
Yeah, Energy Star is just a program where we submit our energy and they let us know by a score where we fall compared to other school systems throughout the country, actually.
There's a motion by Mr. Wilson, a second by Mr. Campbell, to have the district apply and become a part of the energy, what is it?
It's an Energy Star program for K through 12 schools.
Good. Any discussion? All in favor of the motion, please indicate by raising your hands. Those who oppose, that's unanimous, 7-0 vote. I think it's 7. 7, yeah. Thank you.
Well, I don't know how, do you want us to go into talking about what we're doing? Or does anybody have any questions about
I have
this?
lots of questions about that.
Well, does anybody have any questions about our performance? Because this is really just based on the Energy Star program. And what I've done, I've broken down some of the things that we've discussed in the past or had here in the past into the different segments we have. You want me to go in this in a lot more detail? Or
Just run down and I'll tell you where I have the questions.
Okay. One of the things, start by making a commitment. You just did it. You just said that you're willing for us to benchmark ourselves against other schools, so starting off, we just did that. Number two, shall explore non-traditional alternative energy methods. That is what's been there in the past, and one of the things I'd like to suggest is that we evaluate all energy on a payback period. All energy items. It'd be good to for the board to set a payback that if there's a technology out there and it's shown to work and it can pay back in 5, 7, 10 years, that's something that we pursue. The federal government, just to let you know, the Marine Corps, they have their standard is they'll consider anything, first it has to be evaluated and technically feasible. They do that on a high level, and then it has to have a 7-year payback. That just means that when the initial investment, the cost savings has to pay for that initial investment in 7 years. You could look at it 10 years. So that, is that answering your question? I don't, as far as alternative energy, we've started to look into many of the items that are out there.
Well, maybe I need to make my comments first and then you can elaborate based on the document.
Okay.
As you know, this is one of the things that I have great interest in.
I do.
And I want to first of all commend the staff, the department, for the energy efficiency efforts that you have made. There's no question that we are a leader in the state. That is not an issue for me. I know you got, pardon? And you received an award for it. That's never been an issue for me. What the concept that I'm trying to promote, and all these other board members and staff will probably say he doesn't know what he's talking about and he's off base and he's crazy, is that I'm interested in seeing us go to the next level, and you've started to move there, is how can we look at alternative energy sources and those kinds of technologies, and how do we bring that to the classroom so it becomes a practical part of what we're teaching in our classrooms. Now, you remember every time we had a facility construction, we would always, or some renovation, we would always ask the question, how does that relate to learning? How does that relate to the classroom? Well, I'm looking at the same thing here. Everything we do, we should show some relationship to what we're teaching, in my opinion. Particularly since we have this focus on STEMs and science, technology, and when we start thinking about our students who are in the rural areas of our county, we have schools in those rural areas. It affords them an opportunity to be exposed to some things that otherwise they might not be exposed to on a daily basis. When you talk about solar panels or other kinds of things, when else do they get a chance to practically be exposed to that? Now, other kids of means may have those kinds of experiences. So what I'm looking for us as a body, to not just adopt the energy efficient piece, but also something that says to the effect, and this is 3 o'clock in the morning, where am I? And I did not use my computer, and I'm having issues with my hand. Something to the fact that we should encourage our teachers at every grade level, K-12, to explore energy systems used in their school or building and develop curriculum connections using the building as a tool to touch core standards. Something, that's what I'm looking for. It's one of those things that you use what you have to enhance what you do before you think about going out and buying a package something. Guess what you have? You've got something in your environment that's there day to day that you should relate to. So I know you guys have started what I call the monitoring piece, and you might want to talk about it, but I'm talking about going beyond just monitoring, but the technology itself, applying it in the classroom, helping our kids be exposed to that, particularly in our rural areas. Okay. So
you're a good lead-in to some of the things I want to talk about. So, well, a couple things just on as far as our performance expectations that we have in here. If you'll notice, well, number 1, make a commitment. Number 5 talks about the principals bringing in energy conservation into the schools. I'll also mention number 3 under set goals. The school shall make all efforts to include energy-related topics in the regular curriculum. The district staff shall make their technical expertise available to school staff where requested for such projects as they are identified. And I'll talk briefly how we're starting to do that. And then under recognize achievement, of course, talking about develop programs that recognize schools and operations that have reduced their overall energy usage. What you're talking about is what's a trend right now in school systems is we've developed energy programs. Now how do you bring it into the classroom? And that's across the nation an ongoing trend to the point where even new construction, they're leaving walls that are open with plexiglass so you can look inside the building. So with that, Jack, you want to bring it up and we'll go, I'll talk about what we're doing. You want me to go ahead? I'll skip to what we're doing with the classrooms. We've started a program, we're trying to get a program started with science teachers in the 5th grade. We started with Bluffton Middle School teachers and Robert Smalls Middle Schools. We chose those 2 as kind of a pilot just because one is a brand new school, one is an older school, so they can compare how both schools function. What we've done as part of energy grants throughout the year, Jack is a big proponent of automated logic. And what that does is allow us control over all the systems in the district. Jack at that computer right now could turn the air on at Hilton Head High School if he wanted to. He has controls to monitor everything that's going on, and this right now is Shanklin. Okay. This is how we have saved a lot of the money.
Now, he can do it from home or at work.
Yeah, it's web-based, yes.
So he's a 24-hour employee.
Yes, he is. Unfortunately, he gets called all the time because yes, if you've ever been in, and what we've done, I mean, what is that we're shutting off he shuts off the air at 5:30 every day in almost all the buildings, 5 o'clock every day in all the buildings. So if you want to have an after-hour program, the teacher or principal has to call Jack and say, hey, I have to have my air on. Because what that does, if people aren't in the building, we don't want to spend the money on air. And that's what this program does, and it also allows them to monitor what's going on with the systems. So what we did is, yes, Mr. Rivers.
You kind of just segued into what I was hoping that you would go to today. Now, I understand about saving money, and we need to do that, but I get concerned from some of the custodians, i.e. at St. Helena, that when they're dealing in the summertime and doing the chemicals to get the school ready, that, oh, I'm up big enough.
Thank you, Mr.
That when they're trying to get the school ready and dealing with different chemicals and stuff, that a lot of times the air is off when they're buffing or whatever it takes to get the school ready. And I'm trying to balance the cost part with the health part, you know, when they're dealing with these chemicals and the school, the air conditioning is not on. So how do we reconcile that dilemma?
A couple things. We did have some problems getting started with the custodial staff. I think, as far as I know, that's all been taken care of. If you know of anything, please let me know. Education was a factor. You know, most of the classrooms, they push the override button, it'll come on for 2 hours. Tanya Moore and most of the guys, Kevin, all these guys are now emailing me a couple days beforehand, telling me if they're going to be in the multi-purpose rooms, cafeterias, and we turn them on whatever hours they request. As far as I know, I don't think, Mr. Rivers, we were having any problems to date doing it.
I think one of the problems that's at Helena, and I could be wrong, that like in the hallway, I'm not sure if the vents are in the hallway.
There isn't any.
So if there aren't any vents in the hallway and that long stretch that needs to be clean and spotless, then how do you deal with that dilemma?
Well, what they're doing, and they would have to do it regardless, is open up some classroom doors and maybe put some fans in the doors and blow the cold air out, because most of the older schools do not have air conditioning in the hallways.
Okay. And not being argumentative,
no,
but,
I'm sure.
But
no.
If you open the door and the hall is long and the doors are, you know, where they are, then you see it's really not creating a fix. It's just a camouflage almost.
And there's nothing really that can turn on to help them any more than what we can do by turning the classrooms on, because there's no AC there. And they're really good now. And again, there was a communications problem. They didn't all call me direct. They were trying to go through different people to get to me. Time I got it, it was late. And now, I know Tanya, a whole bunch of them are emailing me direct. She's calling me all the time. I put some schedules in for her today for Well Branch. So I don't think there's a problem anymore.
Okay.
It was all educational.
Okay. And they were saying something about a button that you mash and this button, but sometimes when you mash the button, it doesn't do what it's supposed to do, and they're sweating and the fumes are in their nose. And
then again, I told them, my cell phone, I'm on 24-hour call. If you have that problem, call me, and which now they're doing. If they're, you know, sometimes the programs will get taken out of the modulars, and the buttons might not work periodically. And now they know if they have a problem, call me, and I'll pull up on my laptop at home, and I can address it for them.
let me ask another question, talking about saving energy then. What would probably be the cost benefit of possibly having vents in the hall? Up front, it may cost us some money, but long run, would there be any way we could do a cost benefit analysis to see if there are any benefits to having vents in the hall, whereas you don't have to worry about the I don't know, I'm not in construction, I'm just saying.
And that's something I don't want to work on facilities planning. All of our new schools do have air conditioning in the halls.
Oh, they do?
Yes, they do. All the new schools do. We are putting that in there, but it's the older schools that didn't have it put in.
Well, that's a small problem, because we're looking for consistency, right? So then at some point in the future, the old schools will be upfitted to be like the new schools, right?
When we do the renovations and put the units in, that's the time to bring them up, and we have been doing that.
Okay, so my next question then would, what's the timeline for that possibly happening at St. Helena?
I say I don't. I had to bring up my CIP. I'm not, actually St. Helena does have some older units. I'd have to get back to you on that.
And you're going to do that when now?
I said I'd have to get back to you.
I'm saying,
know it's not in the next
but when,
year.
I mean, within the next 2 weeks, 3 weeks?
No. I'll get back to you on timeline? Yeah, I can get that to you Monday.
Oh, okay.
All right. As far as the 5-year plan, I'll look in the 5-year plan and see if we have Shanklin in there.
All right,
and where it might fall.
St. Helena.
I'm sorry.
St. Helena did have a major renovation about 3 years ago, and I think some of those, we have to go back through and look at the plans to see for sure what is and what wasn't done over there. But again, we can look at that up and find out.
All right, thank you.
Sure. One thing, quick under the K-12 educating. I had the opportunity to go to Hilton Head in June and talk to the high school kids down there in one of the classes. And I was surprised the interest they had in solar panels and things and the questions they had. And it was a great opportunity for me to talk to those kids, and I would love to do that more with them. And just, they do have that interest. We just need to go out there and help work with them and put these programs together. But I was really shocked the questions they had, the research they did. It was a great opportunity.
Well, go ahead. Since you're controlling it, you're the controller of the units. Why are some classes colder than the others?
Usually.
And what can we do to rectify that? Because inside the room, they don't have the teachers don't have the privilege to make adjustments.
Yes, they do.
They do?
Yes.
Oh, good.
Almost all of the classroom have a slide on the thermostat. And you can, at zero, middle point would be 73 or 74 degrees, depending on what it is, what school it is. And then they have the opportunity, they can raise it or lower it. And probably 90% of the calls I get on complaints, I'll pull up on my computer, I can show you one. It'll show where that slide is set, and if they're cold, it's set the coldest point. If they're hot, it's set to the warmest spot.
Now, what level of highest to lowest? Are you going to allow them to set it at 55 degrees?
No.
Okay. That's what I'm saying. Because at a certain point, you probably need to cut it off. Okay. Now, all we have is set in that way.
Most of the schools are set up 1.5 degrees up or down, which gives you that 3-degree span from total.
Okay, Ms. Burns, and then I want to remind us we should leave folks in the policy now. Go ahead.
I've kind of been misinformed in a sense because I was under the impression, and I was being told that if you run your unit consistently, then as far as the monetary price was cheaper. That it'd be less expensive. I mean, that's basically what I was told. I'm seeing right here that you're saying that we cutting it off at 5 or whatever, because I generally run mine 24/7.
Well, every school is different, and we was talking about 5 o'clock as an average school day. And I just did a quick analysis this morning, and our energy compared for July this year, or last year, to the July back in 2006, we saved $500,000 in 1 month what we're doing on the summer setback. And, if there is a problem, the communications, again, is the #1 thing. If they have an issue, don't suffer with it. Call me, email me, and tell me, because I can pull this up and I can look at the room. I can trend the room. I can go back 4 weeks in the trends and tell you exactly what the discharge air temperature was, exactly what the room temperature was, anything you want to know about it. Mm-hmm. So if they're suffering, it's because they're not telling somebody. And if there's any problems, they just need to let me know.
And I'd say one of the things that we're doing for the improvements is variable frequency drives. When you're talking about leaving it on, it's because every time in typical systems, if they jam on and jam off, that's harmful in the system and costs a lot of money to start up. Variable frequency drives let them start up slow, so we're moving to those. They're more energy efficient, and that way it's not as bad letting them run, but it's not as big a tax on them to start up and shut down.
Since we're talking about the HVAC system and all that, heating, so I need to know, and Mr. Washington loved to ask questions of that nature, but do we have any students that are shattering you all?
I guess you missed that part.
Yeah, I missed that part there. Well, you can repeat it for me then.
You mean as far as the programs go? This is what we are working now with Robert Smalls Bluffton Middle School. I have given them a password, put them in the system so they can look at anything they want. They just can't make serious adjustments, but they can pull this up, they can look at it, and they've been doing it up until school got out, obviously. But that's all things that we are trying to get, and we were discussing putting like a screen in the main entranceway of a school. This is something new, it's very experimental, but this is like a dashboard. It's telling our percentage of the efficiency of the school right now as we look at it, which is Shanklin. And these are the things, we're developing, moving on with, trying to get the kids interested in looking at these things and seeing where they're at. And seeing we're running at 96% efficiency in the school right now, but if you start turning everything on and going crazy, that's going to drop way down. So this is actually a tool they can look at in the hallway someplace and see what we are doing at this present time. We also pull up the kilowatt hours.
Was that what you were referring to, or are you talking about almost technical training?
Some training, not just to look at in the hallway, have them as you go or someone goes, and said, let's go around and check the unit and so forth and see how we, and
Well-
explain to them specifically, because they're taking classes in the physics, they may take classes in the thermodynamic, and if these things are occurring, I think a good thing to look at some of the structures.
And I'd be more than happy if these kids that want to do that and are interested in doing
You
it.
know, because all of this stuff involves physics too, you say, and we have students taking physics, okay?
You know, it's the same thing though, you know, in my experience, you're going to have some kids out there who are very much concerned, we really love to learn it, and you got other kids that could care less about it. I mean, if they can put together some kids that want to take the time, and I'll take them around the school, I'll show them air handlers and chillers, explain the operation to them, bring up these programs and show them how they work, which would be great, because they could probably tell the teacher a few things, you know, well, slide your slide down, you know, things like that, and I'm more than happy to work with them. But we just need to get that part of it organized and find the kids who want to learn it, and I'm all for it.
As a part of the policy discussion, Mr. Speaks, that's what we're saying, that we'd like to see a policy that encourages an educational component that blends into our curriculum.
Right.
That we can in-house do some things. We need to get Dr. Rose, here folks, to see what we can develop.
To answer your question, one of the things is these systems a lot of times are rooftop units, so we're not going to take a class on the roof to
No,
look
I
at
don't
it.
expect you to take a class on the roof.
But this right here actually just shows you the breakdown of a complete system. Now, I'm going to cut, Jack will talk to you about this for an hour on what, but this...
No, he's not.
Yeah, I know, that's what I said, so I'm not going to let him talk about this right now. But this is what we showed the science teachers, and pretty much said, this shows air coming in, it shows air temperatures going out, it shows what part of the equipment that's running. A science teacher could take this as far as they want. I mean, there is some basic stuff we can do that's simple, but if they want to get down to, you know, and when we were talking to the teachers, one of the things they said is when we start bringing this, they could see most of their science fair projects are going to be stuff to do with these units. But
They can talk about resistance, they can talk about
yeah, I mean, you could get as technical as you want. Now, we're trying to start off simple. I mean, one of the things we're looking at is, and one of the things this allows them to do is monitor other schools. You can create competitions, for one thing, on energy use, because you can look at how your school's doing. You can, now that one we're going to have to work out how they can compete. You can see how your room is doing temperature-wise. What's the temperature in your room? What's it coming out? What's on the outside? Yes.
Excuse me, Mr. Jack. Could you put that
Oh, this is where, well, before he goes off, that's just an example of the dashboard where it's showing a school where it could show what your energy use is right now. Like, it looks like what it was yesterday, what it was last month. So there's a lot we can do, and actually the science teachers are also, one of the things I thought was neat when we started showing them this, Robert Small's science teachers were asking, all right, what are the Bluffton Middle School teachers going to do? And they said, I need to get in touch, who's doing that? And they said, well, I gave them the name, said, well, y'all need to talk and see how they can use this. So we're starting off simple, and one of the things we want to do as a pilot and just talk to a few teachers is, I, being a facilities guy, don't know how far they can take it or how far they want to, but we'll support them however far they want to take it.
Yeah. You finished, Ron?
Yeah, I'm finished.
This right here, this diagram, the schematic, I think this is powerful.
It is.
Why am I saying that? You take this to an elementary student, maybe even pre-K, but elementary, let's say that, and this can tweak some interest, some knowledge, because, and I get off on this kind of stuff in electronic background, but this is like, wow. I mean, there's a lot of information there that can capture the interest of a child at a very early age. I mean, we talk about getting out of the box.
There's little jacks out there.
Man, that's...
And
there are.
I mean,
there are a
that's...
lot of little jacks.
And it's showing what's going on in your room, at your school, in your room. I mean, you can, yeah, you can see exactly what's causing the temperature in this room right here to be.
I mean, even the circuitry. I mean, there's a lot of stuff in that. A lot of stuff in there. It's a lot of stuff in there. Huh?
We are offering this course called STEM. These STEM
Yo, that's
programs, and that's
man,
STEM program.
And that's almost like a drink of Tanqueray, man. That's good.
This is what we call.
2 minutes or
This is just the logic. This is what controls everything. We're working really hard improving these logics, and some of the programs that I have designed for the Beaufort County School District are now being used at other schools throughout the state because they are working much, much better. And they've taken these programs and just downloaded them and copied them, and nobody's brought them up to today's speeds. But now we're doing that, and we're seeing a big difference in compressor failures. You know, it's more than just the energy. It's equipment failures and things that we're seeing that we don't like to see. And by changing our programs, how we're controlling different things, and what we're looking at to control them, we're saving energy and we're also saving on equipment. And these are the things that's nice to explain to the kids and get them involved. You know, and one thing I want to say, and I'll shut up, is we owe it to the board, this board, the prior boards, for investing the extra money to put in a good control system. This is one of the best control systems available today, is automated logic. There's a lot of cheaper units out there, and I'm using one in another place, and they're just terrible. You can't do the things that we're doing with automated logic. So I thank you for taking the time and the money, investing in this system, because it's saving, it's paid for itself over and over.
Paid for itself, Bill, you heard that?
Now, one of the things, now when we get, let's circle back around to the CIP requests and the energy efficiency money that we had. Our plan, as you saw, kind of had set up, was to start with I asked Jack, one of the items I wanted to look into is solar hot water heaters. You know, what school needs one right now and what's a good candidate for setting one up, and it ends up being H.E. McCracken. So what we can do is the students at Robert Smalls and Bluffton Middle School can monitor, we're going to, as part of that program, is put, not really a sub-meter, but you're going to be able to monitor the energy use on the hot water heater, that on a daily basis. So students at Bluffton Middle School, Robert Smalls, when they have their class, they can pull it up, they can pull off the data, they can see how much energy it's using before the change. We can install the solar hot water heater, tell them a little bit about that, and then they can monitor it after the change. And they can make for us, for the most part, whether or not that had the right payback period and whether it's worth it, and whether we want to go and do that at other schools. So that's what we have planned right now. And that could be, and then there are numerous little programs we could do that. That's our first one.
So there's the mathematics involved. You see, you can do a percentage change in all the issues.
Right.
There's quite a bit of thing involved in that. And but like I said, it's all referred back to that program we have in our school called STEM.
I want to get back to PE 16, and on page 2, there are some items that are specific to the board. Is that something? Go ahead.
One thing I wanted to make sure that the board is aware, there is no PE 16. There is no PE 16 right now. If the board is desiring to have a energy policy, it would be PE 16.
Okay.
Back in the fall, we also gave you a draft board commitment, a BCR, that would be tied directly to the PE 16.
What I'm interested in having, and I don't see this as being the final document, I think there are good elements, but I'd like to see the language that I quoted earlier about our the board policy commitment to energy efficiency and education that ties into our curriculum, that we make it very known that we expect to use our facilities as a tool for teaching or learning of our students. And I think this is particularly important in our rural area. Because our kids don't get exposed to things.
That would be then, I think, the BCR. If it's the board saying this is what our expectations are, then the PE would be you're passing it along to the superintendent. So this is the October, and it can be tweaked, though, to do what you wanted to do.
What I'm asking us to do, and you guys can present, but I'm asking us to have a draft policy for adoption at our August or September meeting. Something, if we agree to I think people are buying into. We know they're doing great things, but again, we have to show this. In my opinion, we need to show this tie-in that our facilities and our learning In our district, everything is linked, and we take advantage of every opportunity to teach with what we have. So I like our policy and our expectation as a board to express that. And then these guys have already got certain specific things that they've got lined up, particularly through the commitments that we just made, that will reinforce and carry us forward. That's what I'm looking for us to come, that commitment to tweak this, develop the policy for adoption by our September meeting.
I wanted to point a couple of, this is the PE now, not the BCR. Again, there's a link as far as the instructional side of it in page 2 under make a commitment. There's also number 5. There's also an area in here that is number 3. Yep.
I can tell you ones I have comments on or questions about.
Oops, going on.
Number
3, there's related, make all efforts to include energy-related topics in their regular curriculum. And then, I think it's down here, is it number 2? No, which one, Robert? Where's the other one?
Well, the next one, recognize achievement, very last.
There was one more. Oh, right here, yeah. Implement action plan, number 1, again, that has instructional, that the principal should be involved to get employees and students. And then recognize achievement. That when we start this, right now we just dipped our toe in the pool, and that we would be making this throughout all the schools. And there would be, we hope, some competition to see who can earn a prize for saving the most energy. So that's what we have in there now, and then if there needs to be more and be more implicit.
I want to recognize Ms. Bush before you do it. I'll tell you the items on this that I want to work on. Under make a commitment, item 2, I made a notation that needs work, that needs to be elaborated upon a little bit, and I'm working on something to do that, and it includes what I just read a little while ago. Item 4 is another item, and the superintendent knows when it comes to vehicles, she knows, I want us to look beyond just the biofuel. If there's something else, again, that involves solar and multi-fuel, but I've got something on that too.
I'd tell you one of the things.
Batteries, rather, fuel cells and all that.
One of the things I would suggest, and I kind of hinted on it earlier, is not to pick specific technologies.
I agree.
Technologies change all the time.
I agree.
That's why I like, and that's the way the federal government kind of works, is on a payback period. But the technology has to be trusted, and it has to meet a certain payback.
Policy should not be that specific. I'm talking, this really delves into the PE management, the organization, administrative part. It's also number 5. I just think that there needs to be a stronger curriculum tie that we need to expand. It goes back to what Mr. Speaks is saying and what and others are talking about. And Laura's under set goals. I think that we need to make sure that the board doesn't get involved in details. The board should only be involved with policy. That's something that goes back to you guys should set what those specifics are, because those rules change, those kinds of things change, and how we set that up. But that's why I'd like to work with a document to come back to us in September for adoption. Ms. Bush?
Well, yeah. My concerns were under set goals, 1 and 2. I don't see the board's involved in that.
I don't think the board.
Well, to me at least, as far as setting goals where you're involved, is you really need to hold us to the fire. If we set a goal, we need to report to you how we're doing. explain to you how we come to that goal, or report back on, are we meeting it, are we on, what are
We can
doing?
refine the language.
Yeah.
We can do
They gotta
that.
go re-monitor.
Yeah. And to meet those goals, you gotta realize, sometimes it costs money, sometimes. I mean, a lot of energy is conservation, but a lot of it is equipment upgrades and things of that nature.
Mr. Wilson?
Yeah, I think when we set, or somehow in there, we ought to have a payback period.
Yeah.
And I think a 7-year is good for a school district. And I would not, Mr. Washington would like to see new technologies and stuff like that, like you're saying you're using a solar panel. And I know most of them don't have great payback periods, but I would also look to say you could put some language in there. However, new emerging technologies where we're using it for also educational, smaller projects using for educational, like solar panel, maybe have a payback period of 10 years. And we're not talking that because financially that doesn't make a lot of sense, but educationally it does. So that would give us a little bit more flexibility, because I can say that the solar panels and stuff like that are even going to have a tougher time now competing with the lower gas prices, and many electric companies going to natural gas with much lower prices. They're going to have a lot more trouble competing to be competitive, because I think energy prices are going to come down. But yet it's a technology that someday is going to be here, even though it stays not. And we're seeing how many solar panel places are not making it even when they had government assistance. So, but I think something, and let you guys come back, maybe is 10 years a good, or 10 years a good number, but we're not looking at a $100,000 project. We're talking about a $5,000 project here or there, purely that we're using it as an educational as well as a payback, but not so much the payback, but a combination of the two.
Yeah. Since you brought up solar, and I hadn't brought up this before, and I'm going to say this to you in public because I'm going to hold Jack to it. We actually, one of the things we have is we have a solar panel at Hilton Head Middle School. Now, we can get that onto the automated logic, and these kids can monitor it and decide, let us know, is that meeting the payback period? So they could start monitoring the energy. We'd have to tell them the approximate costs and things of that nature, but they can. That would be another item that we could add in that curriculum, is they could start monitoring, and you can talk to kids at Robert Smalls, could monitor the solar panel at Hilton Head Middle School. So, I mean, that's completely doable.
And the last thing is a commercial is, again, when I came on the board, I thought I could help in the energy area, because running a manufacturing plant, melting metal, I thought I had all the answers, and Jack really had so much going on at that point in time that there was nothing I could really contribute except support his efforts to make sure he was allowed to complete his programs, and he's done a phenomenal job.
Do we have solar at Battery Creek?
The only location that I'm aware of,
Solar light.
solar lights, yeah, the only panel array, which is a big panel. Jack, tell me if I'm wrong, is Hilton Head Island Middle School, and that was part of
Palmetto Electric.
Palmetto Electric. That helped with that there. There may be some small solar lights out in the parking lot or something of that nature, but nothing.
I thought the entryway and that whole section
I'll tell you what, at the Battery Creek High School, there's one light that was put at the new entryway, and the solar was cheaper when you start looking at running lines all the way out there, and that's the only way solar would have been cheaper, but it made it cheaper because of that.
Now, middle school, I mean, and there you're talking about small and it's hard to measure. At Hilton Head Middle, it's a large panel array where you can actually look at, if you're going to do it large scale, that would be an example of how a large scale panel would perform.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Anybody else?
Do we want to bring up we held off the 8%, or can I ask that question? We held off the 8% to talk energy. I'll let you ask that question.
Yeah, for approval of the 8% projects, there was a line item that was tied to energy projects. Did you want to address that now, or do you want to wait until August 7th?
I think we were told about that. You're talking about the 200,000, I think.
Right.
This is the time I'd like to make a motion and we approve the 8% projects for next year.
For 2014.
2014. Let me get the dollar amount.
Did you get a second, Mr. Campbell?
Mr. Campbell did, I believe.
And you did a third, Mr. Evans? Okay.
Well covered.
Yeah, I would like to read the dollar amount. Would be $10,161,676. I'm going to leave the cents off.
$10,161,676
For 2014.
All right, we have a motion discussion. Again, Mr. Evans, go ahead.
Well, the first thing is, I thought it was comprehensive, and is really getting into the pattern that we're trying to do, of having rotation instead of the hit and miss that we've had some in the past. And I particularly need to applaud you all for staying at the $10 million level. I know that sounds a lot to people out in the public, but we were spending a good bit more than that before.
13 to 15.
We had that conversation at the board level with our bond attorney and stuff, our advisor, and have brought that down, which in the long run is going to have a very positive effect on the debt millage out there for that hits everybody.
Yes.
So I think that's great.
My comments, I ditto those, but I also think that I really appreciate your doing the overview of the large items, the furniture replacement, the different plans. And I think Mr. Speaks may have been one of those who said, now we're going to make sure that when we replace something, we make sure that its life use has been exhausted and we're not just catering to someone's need. I need a bigger desk now, or something like that, that we're going to be very
That's in the higher schools of education.
and I'm serious, because I'd like to see, if at all possible, to bring that figure down a little more, if it doesn't affect our life safety areas and the lifespan of our building and the investment that we've made. So I just want to put that out there, and I'll call for the question. All in favor of the motion, please indicate by raising your hand. It's unanimous, only seven folks, Bill. I guess you traded out. You came back. Yeah. But go ahead.
And the only thing, I just wanted to get some clear understanding. Are we to bring back then a policy, both a BCR and a PE, that's a little bit more specific?
I'll work with you on that.
Okay, good.
I'll be happy. I'll work on the front end. I'll work with you on that.
Okay.
Any other comments? Yes.
So at the beginning of September?
Right, that's correct.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Because I wanted to go out to folks before that, so if there are any other comments, they can have it.
Okay. Will Mrs. White be back by then?
No, probably. Maybe. But Robert can do it.
Cat's out the bag.
They're both their child.
We talk about best in the state, we can be best in the nation, I can tell you.
Well, that's one of the things that the Energy Star will hopefully show.
Okay, next. Next item?
It's your entrepreneurship versus retirement, Mr. White.
Mr. White, maybe let me one comment. Last year during the legislative time, when the governor vetoed some of the education money, I called up there and said something about money and this, and I said something about we're doing everything we can to control money, like bringing energy bills down, and I was told by the government people there, well, that's not education. So,
okay.
It's a whole different world.
I guess right now, again, this is another one of those topics that I have requested be placed on the agenda. And everyone has said, well, what are you talking about? Here you go. You're saying something about entrepreneurship versus entitlement. What do you mean? Back in March, as far back as October of last year, I went back and reviewed the minutes and notes. We started talking about the concept then. And what I'm trying to do is to get, since this is supposed to be policy-based discussion, trying to find out, and I thought that the board affirmed before, that we agree with the concept that we needed to introduce the notion of entrepreneurship more. We have done that. We had the financial literacy or financial, I forgot what it's called, that Dr. Alford had. We have gotten a partnership with Junior Achievers, Junior Achievement, and some other things, but we need, I thought it was important for us to have as an emphasis and stress again through our curriculum offerings, more opportunities for our students to relate to the free enterprise system and the value of work, and opportunities that exist in our society, that there is nothing that's truly free, that there's a cost to everything. And how can we promote entrepreneurship? How can we promote that industrious attitude that throughout? And one of the things, just as we talked a little while ago about energy and the curriculum applications to energy, we had, I've got so many papers here. I asked Phyllis, and I'm always bugging Phyllis, to pull our energy, our recycling, or what do you call it? What is
Recycling contract.
Well, it's not, recycling is a part of it, but it's the solid waste contract that has a recycling component. And I think that was put online, and one of the things as I went through it, I said, well, if the contract reads that we have an opportunity to earn money through the contract, and I think it says that, I was trying to find out exactly what the amount was, and I couldn't. I found out what the cost of recycling is, $13,000 some odd a year. That's what it says in there. But I never could find how could we earn money back through the recycling process. And I thought that was another one of those projects, if we had students who were interested to teach that concept. We've got a contract. Again, we've got a tool within the district. How can we use that to engage our students? Number one, it's an environmental thing. When we talk about our environment, preserving our environment, and talking about recycling. And it could also be a model to show how you earn money. That if the contract has built into that, we get money. How can we take advantage of that? Those kinds of things. What other opportunities do we have to demonstrate within the operation of the district the whole notion of entrepreneurship? Okay? And that's what I'm looking for. Now, I could never get the answer on what we could generate. I couldn't find that, and I'm not an attorney, but that's an awful legal document that I went through, and I don't have the pages in front of me. But I know that it did cost, the cost of the recycling was so much per year, and that's where it is. So I'm pushing another opportunity to incorporate within the way we do business, within, I guess, a curriculum framework. How do we do something like that? And again, I look at opportunities in the rural areas, again, that if we have a school that's introducing this concept to students, that there are things students can do out in the community that they might think about, hey, listen, let's get a group of us together and let's create our own little recycling, something that we can work with someone on. I don't know. But again, it's one of those things that piquing the interest, I guess, is what the term that I heard used. Those are the kinds of things we can do. So I want a little discussion on that. Go ahead and shoot it down. I saw Mr. Evans' hand first.
I wouldn't shoot it down. From time to time, we've had student groups do that. And the time that I've been in the district or connected with the district, we've had groups of students at an elementary school or middle school or high school say, don't throw your newspapers away. We'll collect them, and they go through the task of collecting up the newspapers at the school, when we had vending machines that put out sodas more than the ones that put out the plastic bottles and stuff now, but you could do it with plastic bottles just as well. I know that for a period of time there was a group at Hilton Head High School that went and collected up all those cans and put out special trash cans and tried to encourage their classmates, put your empty Coke can in here, and then they were recycling the aluminum, and they were keeping it for, I can't remember what club it was or whatever that was using the money. But we've already had that. I bet you there's somebody doing it right now. I don't know who, but I bet you there's some.
Are we promoting it?
Well, I'm not
I guess
sure we are.
my thing is that it's again, what do you promote? Is it a concept? Is it a value? Is it something that on a policy level you promote? Again, I'm not looking to get into the weeds. I'm saying, does it have value to promote and incorporate in what we do? That's all I'm saying. It's opportunity, creating opportunity, as I see it. Now, there could be other aspects. I haven't looked at everything, but that's the one that just kind of always jumps out at me. Well, I guess we had a long day.
No, I know one thing, Ms. Bush handles up.
Ms. Bush.
Recently, I'm not sure this year or last year, wasn't there a student at Battery Creek that created a business model, was it Battery Creek? But there was a student in this district that created something. Anyway, in this economy, what's being echoed is home-based businesses and self-employment and entrepreneurship. Yep. So I think for us to pursue this direction is very healthy and helpful. I'm sure that our students could come up with a lot more other ways of generating and creating businesses than we can, but I think the concept is something I would support.
And it's just not personally, it's not just personally creating business now, but again, it's that attitudinal, that expectation, that understanding how the system works, opportunities that we can promote that. That's what I'm looking for. Mr. Rivers?
Yeah, the concept, I think even the concept itself is already being used because, believe it or not, in some areas, kids and parents are forced to collect cans and stuff to try to make ends meet. I mean, so that's in some, you talk about like in the rural areas, I mean, there are people.
It's not just the rural area, I got neighbors.
No, but you said you were trying to focus on the rural areas and bringing that concept into the school. And some of those children already understand, get the cans and bottles and, it ain't like back in the day when you could get the trade in for 2 for penny cookies, but, I mean, times are different.
All right, Ms. White, I found the area that I couldn't find details on it. It's 3.28 in the agreement revenue share arrangement. Do we have a defined revenue share arrangement?
Well, I hate to.
Burst my balloon, but go ahead.
Our revenue sharing is a negotiated price on the monthly charge. So our charges are lower to offset.
The recyclables
Yes,
collected?
yes. Notice how low the cost is compared to the amount of
13,000.
recycling that they take away?
13,000.
That's our share. Is we negotiated a lower price.
Okay. All right. I've got more work to do. We'll work on it. Any other comments?
Let me ask you a question.
Yes, sir.
I know we have a lot of grease and stuff from the cafeteria, and we have companies coming and popping out.
I know that we, in the cafeteria, we have a lot of grease in some form of container, and we have companies come in and pump it out. Are we getting a certain percentage of that? Because they probably take that and utilize it and sell it and make, they're recycling. Are we getting something from it?
I don't think so.
So what, we need to get a truck ourselves and have someone to do this.
Can we find out if we do enough volume that it's worth us pursuing getting some proceeds.
Yeah, recycling out grease, the grease from the cafeteria. Grease trap.
Because,
And we pump it out and go sell it.
I mean, I don't know enough about.
I don't think it's that much.
kitchen
Look
stuff,
at-
but we don't do any frying at all.
We don't do what now?
Any frying, we don't fry.
Remember with our nutrition policy, we cut out
Exactly.
some stuff?
We clean the grease traps out because of just health reasons, but we don't have any grease that we fry.
The fried grease and stuff, so it's.
We don't have any grease.
We bake everything.
We bake everything.
Tastes like it does.
So no wonder the kids,
Bacon.
no wonder the kids said, I don't want to eat.
It's all baked, even the french fries.
No,
they're still in
if that
grease.
happened, I think we can look into that and hopefully
I
buy a
didn't think
couple
we
of trucks
tried
and do
anything.
our.
We're a greaseless institution now, okay?
Getting rid of the grease saves the
When I
money.
go in the cafeteria, I don't want to
All
be
right,
sliding
so
down
if there's
Look,
nothing else, so we're
There's
gonna-
money in it. We just changed companies that pick up. We used to recycle our own stuff and take it to the dump, you know, or to one of the
What about paper
places.
recycling?
We changed companies, and we don't have to separate the stuff at all. We just put it all, they've got somebody someplace that's separating it. So there's gotta be a bunch of money in that.
It's a place right up on Burton, if you go up 802 and turn right by the golf thing, there's a facility that the city uses that they go and separate all that stuff up there. It's a company that they vendor with, because I was curious, who's taking care of all the stuff I'm putting together in my recycling box,
You
everything?
don't
And
even
he
have
said,
to
don't worry
put it
about it.
together anymore.
Yeah,
You can
single
throw it all in one box.
That's what I'm
and
saying.
don't separate it for you.
Yeah, they do it, but anyhow, all right, next item. I know what I have to do. What's my agenda? Where is it?
Expanding community
Community
involvement.
involvement in our schools.
Expanding community involvement in our schools. Well,
We discussed a little bit of that this morning.
yes, sir. Another one of those items that we say that, I wanted this one, because there is great interest now. Everyone's talking about choices, and we don't offer choices, and I think that we've got more choices in this school district than the average. I know we do. But how do we get more, not just parents involved, but how do we get more business people? How do we get more non-parents actively supporting and involved in our schools? I'm talking about retirees. I'm talking about the 60% of the population that does not have children in our schools. How do we do that? I want to have some discussions
I
about
think
that.
one way we can do that is, along with the superintendent and her staff and board members, go to these retirement communities and talk about what is going on in our schools. And invite the retirees to come into our school and volunteer. In fact, when I was I was collecting signatures, a lady who lived out in Sheldon, she said she would be very proud to come and volunteer in the school, you know. So I told her, you know, what she had to do to get in touch with the principal.
Are we satisfied with everything we're doing as a board to involve the community in our schools?
I'm sorry, go ahead, Laura.
Some time ago, we used to have, we had community forums that, not board meetings, but an opportunity for the community to address the board and just have a dialogue with the board outside of the boardroom. We probably need to implement that again. The board needs to go to the community.
You know that we did update our PE, whatever it was, and say we will have at least 2 of those per year.
Yeah. We need to follow through.
We need,
We need to follow through.
and that each board member is encouraged to have at least 1 or 2 per year
Town
in their
Town hall meeting.
districts. We're scheduled for another one in August.
I don't like those. At the board,
Okay, so just want to remind us that that's coming up. Or did we substitute, Robin? Did we decide that the breakfast was that one for August instead of having that? I thought we did that, if my memory. Okay. But we do have two. We had one in one in February, and then in August. We wanted to have one after midpoint and then before school started, and that's when we substituted the state of the schools for that one.
You know, something that we used to do years ago, I think Mr. Gaither was superintendent there. We used to go to places like Brays Island, Harbor Island, Fripp Island, Kalawasi, board members, and along with the superintendent, and go into the community and sit there and discuss and let the people talk, you know, and we did that. We just got away from it,
So am I hearing you encouraging us to do that again, Mr.
Yes,
Burns,
I
and
do.
then Ms. Bush? I mean, Ms. Bush. Mr. Burns, help me out here because I'm looking one way.
Yeah, I know that the board decided to have two meetings with the stakeholders with the school improvement councils. I would hope that next year we would move away from the council chambers, find a place where we're sitting up in the dais and we're sort of looking down on it. It's not, the dialogue, the exchange is not there as much as I thought it would be. Something like this, and more open, more of a free-flowing dialogue versus a pan-pat kind of statements presented. There's not enough dialogue, so I would hope that we would move away from that setting. And I'm not even that particular of having it where it can be covered by the county channel. If that can be done, that's fine. I am more interested in the open dialogue more than having it covered. So I think we need to find another way of having that done next year. In my opinion, I don't like the way it's set up now.
Well, what we could do is
had Mr. Evans. Okay.
Well, I'll go back, and I think I've been involved with two of those. One of them was at county council, and we got off of the dais, came down on the floor, and I thought that helped a lot with communications. Now, we kind of got forced back because somebody said they couldn't film it properly, and I'm like, well, I'm not sure that's the most important thing necessarily. I do agree with, I thought the one we had at Whale Ranch was very informative and stuff, but I think that because it was, there was an agenda to it, meaning there were certain things that we covered, okay, it restricted maybe some of the free flow questions and answers and stuff. I'm not even sure that you didn't make a point about that sometime during that meeting.
We did.
Mr. Washington. The other thing I look at simply...
I got called on the carpet by a couple of people, and I said, no problem, we'll deal with that.
The other thing I look at simply, and, you know, we've got 5 clusters. We've got 10 months in the school year. You know, we ought to be able to figure that one out. You know, that we do, you know, each semester we go to one of the clusters, you know, or we go to each cluster and have that kind of exchange, and then we have an open one. But I like Mr. Campbell's idea because, you know, our concern that we always talk about is there's an audience out there that already supports us that we get to these things. The people we got to get to are the ones that aren't supporting us or don't know that much about us, and so they don't know whether they want to support us or not. Okay? And I think that's when you get behind some of the gated communities or go some where you go to them instead of saying, oh, well, we got a meeting and it's at this place, why don't you come? And they're like, I'm sorry, I'm not going to, you know, but, you know, you set up something, well, I'll be particular in my area, out at Datal and say, you got a clubhouse? Yeah, we got a clubhouse. Okay. Can we come out there and you all fire away?
So what I'm hearing,
figuratively,
one of the things I'm hearing from 3 people at least is when we establish a board calendar in October, November, let's look at targeting dates for those type sessions. That's what I'm hearing.
Location.
Any objection? At least going to those areas, as pointed out by Mr. Campbell, Mr. Bush, and Mr. Evans. That's one of the things that we can incorporate in a calendar.
Yes.
Mr. Rivers?
Yeah, I agree with that wholeheartedly as well. And I would love to see us put one at Penn Center, because when we're talking about reaching the maximum amount of people and creating a culture, there's some things we need to go back to basics.
Yeah.
And I'm even talking about in our community. That's our, I'm talking about in Beaufort, because Penn Center and its history has ignited a whole lot of stuff, whether it be Martin Luther King or whatever. And right now, as we've acknowledged, we have a crisis in some areas when it comes to educating our kids. And maybe taking it to the community could tweak, motivate, encourage, different ideas, different ways of solving this problem. So I'm all for that.
Okay. All right. Anything else? Any other thoughts? Yes, sir.
I know we had a presentation from Dr. Truesdale yesterday, and one of the things she talked about in regards to some of the schools was people becoming more visible, and I agree with that. One of the most successful things I remember us doing was having coffees in the evenings, where we'd just go out, a couple of people from the staff and somebody in the community would host us, or we'd go to a church or the public service district or someplace where there was a space and just meet. We might have 10 or 15 minutes where we talked about something specific, but I know that for some people it's very difficult for them to come to school. Either it's just physically difficult, or they might even have school wasn't my thing and I really don't need to be going there Monday night to listen to this. But if you put it in their church, they're going to show up. You put it out in their community someplace, you put it at their neighbor's house, they're going to come over and have a cup of coffee and some cookies and listen to what you have to say. And I think that's another thing we can do about this, that I think we need to set the tone of reaching out to the community, but I think we could also set an expectation that people do that, and they try and do it in smaller numbers and such.
In terms of staff?
Well, I mean,
Board.
our community is so diverse. Our community is so diverse. I mean, Hilton Head was very diverse. And I got to speak to a totally different group of people when I went into a gated community or when I went to Mount Calvary Baptist Church. I mean, and they all had their own interests, as they should, and they all had their own
No, I understand
issues.
that, but I want
And
to
it
make
was
sure
great.
what we're talking about, again, since we're in a policy discussion, I'm hearing you say that that's something that at all levels of the district should be encouraged, the going out in the community, whether it's board, whether it's central staff, whether it's school leaders or teachers, that's what's encouraged at all levels. That's what I want to make sure I understand what you're saying.
And I am, exactly.
That's what I'm hoping.
And I'm advocating that we get out of our own little
things.
universe sometimes and go to somebody else's universe.
Okay. All right. Anything else? I keep losing my agenda. You want to take
Mr. Washington?
Yes, sir.
Do we need to set a time, a date for this, or
for
the going out into the community, and how many are we going to do? Because we can within a year we could hit every community that we want to hit. And I think.
Well, here's what I'm looking at. I think specifically the board can put in its calendar and those specific things that the board's going to do. What I'm more interested in is to go beyond that and get with the administration about a policy that we're saying that encourages all levels to do these kinds of things, that would encourage schools, because there are some schools who do it. I know that there are some schools who go out in the community and do things. But I'd like us to make sure that at every level we've got things covered, and it's a part of expectations. It's what are our expectations, and I want to make sure that we have something that outlines that for everyone in consultation, so we can make sure that folks understand that maybe it's a part of those reviews that she does that say, have you been in your community and, engaging conversation, just like we hold her on her list of visits and all that stuff.
I was just going to say just that. I mean, she obviously has recognized a problem someplace and said, you will. It's not, I think you should, it's you will, and I'm going to evaluate you on it. And I think we all know that when you're evaluated on something, you go get it done, right?
Right. So but hopefully it's one of those professional growth things that, again, if you're in a community, if you're going to be effective, and it's just not a checking off the box exercise, this is an expectations for developing relationships. This is an expectation to develop an I care attitude. This is an expectation that says that the culture of the school district is one of care and want to understand. Okay? So that's what we're setting up with this. That's what I'm hearing you tell me.
And also, by going out to these different communities, you're educating the public. Because we got a lot of folks that don't know what goes on in our school. They don't. And some of and especially some of the gated communities. The only thing they hear is what the neighbor tell them, or somebody, or somebody's against something that the school district is doing, or what they read in the paper.
I've got it. All right. Break. We got it. They're going to remove things, and then the superintendent's going to get out early. Yeah. Go ahead and continue on.
That's what I think.
Take a break.
Oh, are you?
There's something
You told me
that I
put this ball on
I
the table.
neglected to do and to acknowledge the superintendent who's got some things to share with us. Mr. Burns, I'm sorry to make you walk all the way over there to recycling.
Mr. Burns wanted to be first in line for our Get New Water. I just wanted to thank the board for coming in early this morning and spending time with us as we discussed a little bit of next steps. Always at your work session, you all are looking at trends from the past and projecting into the future. And as I shared with you retirement plans in the upcoming year, I just wanted to thank the board for your time. And as I committed to you this morning, we would share that with all of our staff today midday, which we have done, and with our community, with our School Improvement Council leaders. Our principals, of course, were first, and my team. And I just want to thank the board for all of your vigilance as we look forward into the next few years. We are going to be steadfastly moving towards all of the goals that you set the last 2 days, as well as all the work sessions and the board meetings that you do as we chart the path going forward. And just wanted to thank the board for your time and indulgence. It's a great opportunity. It's a little bit of a surprise that I have 30 years in. That sort of surprised me. It went fast, but 30 years is a lot of years. So, thank you.
Well, Dr. Truesdale, I think that, well, it's very difficult for the board to put in words right now our genuine and heartfelt feelings, and because I don't want to show too much emotion right now, we won't say any more, but we want to give you our heartfelt thanks. Okay. With that, we'll take our break.